A very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. On today's show, the Prime Minister sits down with Sky News after triggering a bitter war of words with Nigel Farage.
Plus, the Taliban have shut down the internet in Afghanistan. We'll ask what it means for women to be cut off from the world.
It's Wednesday, the 1st of October. Your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer tells Sky News that he doesn't think Nigel Farage is a racist, but says he's pursuing a racist policy on immigration.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country.
Also ahead, Princess Anne makes a surprise visit to Ukraine in support of children affected by war. The US government shuts down after last-ditch negotiations fail and funding is cut off. Plus, we report on the growing campaign to throw Israel out of Eurovision over allegations of genocide in Gaza. A very good morning to you. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has insisted he does not believe Nigel Farage or his supporters are racist, but says they are pursuing racist policies on immigration. Sir Keir was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, after he used his keynote conference speech to accuse the Reform leader of hating Britain. The comments triggered an angry response from Nigel Farage and accusations that Labour is dragging politics into the gutter. Here's Beth's interview.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders, they're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. So why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours. They have contributed and built their lives in this country.
But some might go.
But this goes to the heart of who we are as a country.
Okay.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country, and that's why it's a really fundamental issue.
Do you think that he is caught in racist with this policy?
Well, look, I'm not going to start bandying.
Well, you called it a racist
policy. The policy.
So is he caught in racist
with
it?
I think the policy is racist. I think it's immoral, and I think I'll tell you, I've had so much sort of incoming communications about this. People from minorities in this country who feel more scared now than they've felt for years. It's sent a shiver down their throat. It has said to communities who thought they were part of what it is to be British that somehow they're not British. I think that's a very dangerous place for us to go as a country, and it goes against everything that I believe in.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
Okay.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist
nonsense.
to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been really clear that the idea that in London we're introducing Sharia law is rubbish.
Is it racist?
It's rubbish.
OK, you're not going to say it. So you'll criticise Farage for it, but not Farage. Donald Trump said Sadiq Khan was a terrible, terrible mayor, among the worst in the world, is he?
No, of course he's not. He's doing a very good job as Mayor of London. And in fact, serious crime is down. And again, whether it's Andy Burnham or Sadiq Khan, we work very closely with our mayors.
Okay.
But I also have a very good relationship with Donald Trump, the President of the United States. We have a good personal relationship, and we work on behalf of our countries extremely closely together.
Well, our political correspondent, Mari Aurora, joins me now from Liverpool. Mari, fascinating stuff from Beth then. We're going to play more of it at 1:30. I think what she was sort of getting at in the crux of that clip we played is the Prime Minister's opened the can of worms by using the racist word earlier in the week and continuing to use it during the week. And once you've done that, you have to be absolutely sure on your facts. And I think, as I watched that there, willing to then answer other questions about whether other people qualify for that area. And otherwise, it starts to make your argument unwind a little bit. And I think just the added point that you'd have to throw in there is that there were some comments during the week as well from him and from others of wanting to lower the tone of politics and make things less toxic. And I guess it's hard to suggest that you're not personally playing a role in that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I actually put this to someone senior in government yesterday. I said, hold on a second, we have Keir Starmer saying that reforms policies are racist, but it took Keir Starmer 48 hours before he even commented at all on Donald Trump's comments around Sadiq Khan wanting so-called Sharia law in London. And I said, oh, hold on a second, isn't that a bit of a double standard? And they said, you know, candidly to me, well, to be honest, we can say things about Nigel Farage and we just can't say the same kinds of things about Trump. We cannot, because of our relationship with America, because of the fact that we need Trump on side. And so I think the difficulty, and what Beth was getting at there, was that it gives an impression that Keir Starmer is willing to call out racism or prejudice or discriminatory behaviour or whatever you want to brand it as, when it's politically convenient, but not when it's politically inconvenient. And I think that's the difficulty. We'll see if it makes any difference, but I think that was what Beth was getting at, and I think that is an interestingly valid point.
What's left of conference today, Mari?
So very little. We have a couple of speeches. We have Emma Reynolds, who is the new Environment Secretary, and then we have Ed Miliband, the Energy and Net Zero Secretary as well. And then Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, will be giving the kind of closing remarks. And then everybody goes home. There's also going to be the hustings for the deputy leadership as well. So that'll be interesting in terms of what might come out of that. But today really is just kind of the tail end of the conference. All the big moments really have happened. Sorry to Emma Reynolds and Ed Miliband.
Yeah, don't tell them that.
Anything explosive. Yes, but nonetheless, the centrepiece is always the Prime Minister, and that has now happened. And so really it's about people starting to wind down, going back to Westminster or back to their constituencies, and MPs, to be honest, are feeling far more positive than they were 2 days ago. Talking to MPs, they have been slightly pleasantly surprised by the PM's speech. They were pleased with the content, they were pleased with the tone of it. Do they think it's enough to turn things around? They're not sure yet, but they think that genuinely he's bought himself some time and that actually there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps.
Mari Aurora brands Ed Miliband irrelevant. That's the headline tomorrow, I think.
I never said that.
I know you didn't quite say that. No, we look forward to the rest of the conference. I actually think those speeches could be quite good. And we will be covering them in detail, as always. Nonetheless, Mari, we'll see you again shortly during the rest of the morning's programme. Now, Princess Anne has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky and paying tribute to the children killed in the conflict. Sky correspondent Olivia Guthrie is here with me to discuss this. And this is the most high-profile royal family member to go this far, is it not?
It certainly is, after Sophie went last year and has been very much kept secret for security reasons until now, but very much wants to be talked about in order for the Princess Royal to highlight the plight of children and families on the front line. And perhaps the most striking image from her visit was her placing a teddy bear at a memorial for children who have been killed in this conflict, telling Ukraine's First Lady that her daughter Zara had the same teddy bear. Now, this visit comes just 2 days after an aerial bombardment by Russia of Kyiv killed 4 people, including a 12-year-old girl. More than 650 children have been killed as a direct result of the invasion, and nearly 20,000 have been forcibly deported by Russia in that time. Now, this visit, she also spoke to President Zelensky about Britain's support of Ukraine, and she gave him an envelope with a red royal crest on the back of it, which is thought to be a personal letter from the King. The Princess Royal also visited wounded soldiers, and she was given a tour of a rehabilitation centre where they are sent after being on the front line. Now, this visit comes just about 2 weeks after Prince Harry also visited Ukraine, but in a rather less official capacity. And it also follows the King discussing with President Trump how important it is for the US and Britain to help secure peace in Ukraine.
Olivia, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Right, let's get you up to speed on all the day's other stories. And Leah's got those for us.
Thanks so much, Wilfred. The United Nations mission to Afghanistan has urged the Taliban to immediately restore internet and mobile access across the country. The group imposed a nationwide blackout. It was part of what they call a crackdown on immorality. Our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, has managed to find internet access and joins us now from Afghanistan. This is a huge deal, Cordelia. Tell us about the implication, and has there been any reaction from the Taliban as to why they've done this now?
This widespread shutdown appears to have caught the country off guard, including ordinary Afghans, hospitals, reportedly, even some of the Taliban's own ministers. It is nationwide, and it follows about a week of some connectivity issues within Afghanistan. We've been travelling across provinces. We've seen intermittent access to the internet play out in those areas. Now, it was framed then as a clampdown aimed at preventing immoral acts, but this time round, this is a lot more widespread, a lot more severe in its impact. And we have had so far, it's about just gone 10:30 in the morning here, no official indication from the Taliban what the reason is behind this shutdown, nor how long it might be in place. And that has caused a lot of chaos here in Kabul. We were at the airport. We saw lots of relatives turning up to see if their loved ones would be arriving on flights. We also saw people that were trying to leave Kabul, but no flights yesterday came in or out of international flights from Kabul airport. Lots of people speculating as to what might be the reason. Rumour about possible security movements that's part of protocols. And a lot of people worried they cannot contact emergency services as it stands, their loved ones. And when it comes to the banks, they are open, but the operating systems are not accessible. And so far, we don't know where this is going. Now, the international community, aid agencies have raised deep concerns. We have heard from the UN, who said that this threatens to cause a great deal of harm to ordinary Afghans. We've also heard from Amnesty International, who have said that it is reckless. There are worries that this is part of an attempt at broad censorship and to restrict access to education for girls. The Taliban banned access to schools for girls over the age of 12. Many have been learning in secret online. Of course, they will not be able to do that now, and they face a very uncertain future in the days ahead. Now, there is some speculation that perhaps a degree of connectivity might be able to return sometime soon. But as I say, we have had no official indications, no official statements from the Taliban itself. I think what we have seen in this effective blackout for the country is just how quickly and how deeply Taliban policy can change the course, reshape the future of this country.
OK, Cordelia, thank you. Cordelia Lynch there with the very latest on that nationwide blackouts of the internet across Afghanistan. We will be speaking to an ex-Afghanistan minister later on in the programme. But now let's take you through some of the day's other headlines. We'll take you to Gaza, where heavy shelling and large explosions have been seen across the Strip. Overnight, Hamas is under pressure to accept Donald Trump's peace plan, with Qatar, Egypt and Turkey urging them to agree to the terms. Mr. Trump warns that if his plan is rejected, Israel will have free rein to, quote, do what they have to do. 5 unoccupied houses along North Carolina's Outer Banks have collapsed into the ocean. This is as hurricanes Humberto and Imelda continue on their path towards Bermuda. People on the island are bracing themselves for these massive storms, and it comes after 2 people were killed in Cuba as a result of the storm. At least 69 people have been killed and more than 150 injured after an earthquake in the central Philippines. A magnitude 6.9 quake has also caused widespread power outages and damage to buildings. Whilst there's no tsunami threat, multiple aftershocks have been recorded. And the Spanish islands of Ibiza and Formentera have been hit by widespread flooding, recording the most rain in a single day since 2015. Remarkable pictures, those. And back here from today, GP practices across England must offer online bookings for doctor's appointments throughout the day. Let's hope this will put an end to that daily 8 a.m. rush where patients had to call at opening time to secure a slot that day. And then half of adults in the UK used mobile contactless payments regularly last year, while cash accounted for less than 10% of payments for the first time.
Now, the US shutdown the government, has shut down for the first time in almost 7 years after last-ditch attempts to agree a spending bill failed. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has this.
This is a huge deal. As of midnight Washington DC time, the US government is in shutdown for the first time in more than 6 years. And that's because this Senate is deadlocked on 2 competing funding bills, one proposed by the Republicans and one proposed by Democrats. But this is not just about politicians. This will have a very big impact. This shutdown will have a real-world impact on ordinary people. National parks, for example, the likes of the Grand Canyon and Yosemite, they will go unstaffed. Some may be forced to close down while this shutdown continues. Things like, the National Mall, that iconic stretch of land between the Capitol building where these very politicians work and the Lincoln Memorial, that will be chained up. Donald Trump has said that there will be mass layoffs of federal workers. He says that will include Democrats. President Trump, as you may imagine, is trying to spin this to his political advantage. He says that Democrats are holding out because they're trying to pursue free healthcare, in his words, for illegal aliens. That is a false claim. While Democrats are pursuing more affordable healthcare for Americans, that would not extend to undocumented immigrants. On the other hand, Republicans are saying that Democrats are being hypocrites. They're saying that Democrats want a public showdown with this president, never mind the cost to ordinary Americans. And I guess the really crucial thing is we just don't know how long this standoff between the 2 political parties, how long this shutdown will last.
Martha Kellner there for us, and just worth mentioning that the US markets, the futures after this shutdown was confirmed just after midnight US time, are pointing lower, but nothing too pronounced. So the S&P 500 expected to open down by 0.5%. A reminder, of course, a shutdown is very different from a default. And as Martha was explaining, there were 2 in Trump's first term, 1 in Obama's term. They become more of a problem the longer they go on, as workers miss out on a full month's pay if it ran for 30 days for those people working paycheck to paycheck. But all of those payments are caught up otherwise. So if it lasts just for a few days or even a week or 2, the long-term impact is minimal. Nonetheless, the market at the moment down 0.5% in the futures ahead of the open in the US. Let's speak now to the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, who joins me now. Very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning from Liverpool.
Rate the Prime Minister's performance yesterday out of 10. Honestly, don't say 10 because it wouldn't be honest.
Of course I'm going to say 10. I thought it was a wonderful speech. And 10's not impossible. I thought it was a really good speech, and let me tell you why. I think 2 things in particular. One, a sense of fight back that I think that the party has wanted to see after some difficult headlines and stories in the earlier part of this month. And the second word that struck me as I listened to it was belief. His strong sense of belief in the UK, what makes the country great. He spoke about the community spirit that we see in the country every day, some of the great creativity that we have, some of the great industries we have. A speech that was really proud of Britain. So I think it lifted the hall, but more important than lifting the hall, I think it communicated a real hunger for more delivery to the British public.
I think one of the other big themes was sort of decency versus division throughout the speech, and suggesting that he and you and your government take the side of decency, and accused Reform in particular of taking the country down a line of toxic division, I think was a phrase that was used a couple of times. I guess it's interesting that comes at the same time that your Deputy Prime Minister, for example, if we put aside just using the word racist by the Prime Minister and many other ministers during the course of the week, the Deputy Prime Minister this week accused Nigel Farage of supporting the Hitler Youth. Is that not hypocrisy there, clear and simple? He said flirting with the Hitler Youth.
Look, let's focus on what this debate about decency or division is about. You've had two big political events in the last week. One is our conference, which we're coming to the end of today. The other was this press conference that Nigel Farage and Reform had last Monday. And at that press conference, he threatened to take people who had come here legally, worked here legally, paid tax here legally, made a big contribution to the UK, and rip up their settled status and threaten to deport them. That is not the British way. It isn't a decent thing to do. And it's really interesting to me that in all the controversy of the last 24 hours over who said this or who's calling this other person this, you haven't had a defence of that policy from Reform. And I'll tell you why you haven't had a defence of it is because they know it has gone too far. And if they did it, it would contravene Britain's sense of decency, because Britain doesn't go back on its word. That's not the British way. It's not the right thing to do. And I think what we've seen in the last 24 hours is a lot of protesting rather than having a debate about the substance of that policy.
Well, then, I know you've been busy this week. Then you haven't been watching this programme. We had Zia Youssef on Monday, and we had a long discussion about the policy. We're going to have him on again today, and we'll continue that discussion. But with all due respect, Minister, you completely ignored my question. If you are, as a government and the Prime Minister leading this, criticising people for lowering the tone of the debate and taking us down a path of toxic division, do you not condemn your Deputy Prime Minister for accusing Nigel Farage of flirting with supporting Adolf Hitler?
Well, look, I think David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, has made further comments about that himself, and I used the old phrase from politics about playing the ball and not the man. That is the best way to do these things. So I think it's better we focus on policy. And as I say, when you do focus on policy, that's when we realise that last week's policy announced by Reform went way too far. And I don't want to see people
forgive me, Minister,
who've come here legally worried about their status.
Forgive me, Minister, you said that already, and that's not what we're focusing on here. He did say you should play the ball, not the man, yet he played the man. He didn't issue an apology. He retracted the comment and then reiterated the point that he says he likes to play the ball, not the man, while continuing to say that people can make their own judgment about Nigel Farage. He hasn't apologised for the statement. Do you condemn that he made it?
No, I've got nothing to add to what David Lammy himself has said on this. And as I say, I'm focused on the policy. David Lammy said what he said. He said he issued another statement last night, and I don't have anything more to add to that. But
do you understand
and we
how
can
that
chase
can
around
seem...
these comments.
Well, yeah, I know, but you as a government, starting on Sunday when the Prime Minister said that Reform's policies are racist, started this debate. And when we use these words, we absolutely must make sure our arguments are accurate. So you guys started this debate. We are chasing around the words because of that. And can you not see how people will see this all as hypocritical when the Prime Minister gives a speech yesterday to say we've got to take the heat out of these things, we've got to rise above toxic division, and you won't condemn someone labelling Nigel Farage as potentially flirting with Adolf Hitler?
No, I think there's something else going on, which is why I returned to the answer that frustrated you a moment or two ago. I think a lot of reforms protesting about this is because what they don't want to talk about is the policy they announced last week. And the policy they announced last week was a deeply un-British thing to do, which is to break your word to people who've come here legally and done nothing wrong. It was a bad policy. It was a mistake. They don't want to defend it. And so what they do when Keir Starmer makes a speech is issue lots of protests about he's called them this or he's called them that. Let us focus on the substance here of what has been announced, because we're going to be having this debate in a big way over the next few years. And the importance of Keir Starmer's speech yesterday was he wants to have this debate. He wants to stick up for an optimistic, future-looking vision of Britain against those who say that everything is broken, everything's terrible, because the last thing that they can really admit is that the country is a great country at its heart. Yes, we have some challenges, but in government, we are fixing them. That's why we're putting more money into the NHS. That's why this week we've announced new policies to get young people into work. That's why we stepped in to save manufacturing jobs in the West Midlands the other day, and all the other things that have been announced at this conference over the past few days.
Well, I'm going to move on to the other topics, Minister, but to be clear, you are reverting to what you're saying Reform wants to talk about when you ignore my questions, and Reform in no way dictate the questions I'm asking. So you're actually ignoring my questions, legitimate questions, and I will be putting my own legitimate questions to Zia Yusuf again today, as I did earlier in the week. So I don't think it's fair to dodge questions and suggest we're doing what Reform wants by ignoring the policy at hand. Let's talk about what you're announcing today. How does it add to the gist of what Rachel Reeves was announcing earlier this week to give young people a place in work and a qualification that gets them there?
Oh, this is really important because what I've noticed since becoming the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions a few weeks ago is there are far too many people, young people who are not in work or education or employment. So we've announced a very important youth guarantee policy this week to make sure that everyone's offered a decent place in training, work experience, or an apprenticeship, or ultimately even a job subsidy, because the last thing that we want is people graduating from school onto benefits. We're about giving people a chance in life, and I think you've got to start with young people, because if people get onto benefits after they leave school, the danger is they get into that habit, they never get a chance to find work, and that's a tragic story in life. And there's no reason why it should be happening, because we've got major investment projects coming up in the country. We're talking about building more houses, about an energy transition, about improving the transport system. Big investments happening both in the public and private sectors in the UK. Let's train our people, and train our young people in particular, to do those jobs.
Minister, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the final parts of conference.
Thank you. Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Pat McFadden there, the Work and Pensions Secretary. We're going to take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, the Taliban shut down internet access across Afghanistan. We'll speak to a former Afghan politician now in exile.
a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, but
I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Well, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. In a moment, we'll hear from a former Afghan politician about what it means for women to be cut off from the internet in Afghanistan. But first, let's summarise our top stories for you, Leah.
Thank you, Wilfred. The Prime Minister says Nigel Farage's immigration plan to abolish indefinite leave to remain is a racist policy. But in an interview with Sky's political editor, Beth Whitley, Sir Keir Starmer refused to call Mr Farage himself a racist. Princess Anne has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. The pair discussed the UK's ongoing support for the country while paying tribute to the children killed in the conflict. The US government has shut down for the first time in 7 years. Thousands of government employees will be forced to stay home or work without pay after a deal couldn't be reached to extend federal funding. And there's been more heavy shelling in Gaza overnight as Hamas leaders decide on Donald Trump's proposed peace plan with Israel. He's given the terror group up to 4 days to make a decision. At least 60 people have been killed in a powerful 6.9 magnitude earthquake rocking the central Philippines, knocking out power lines and sending people running out to the streets.
Right, let's bring you more now of Beth's sit-down with the Prime Minister late yesterday.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders, they're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy and making a distinction, and a really important distinction in my mind, between deporting those who have no right to be here, illegally here, which this government is doing, and I agree with, and on the other hand, reaching into migrants lawfully here who've been here for years, working in our hospitals, our schools, and deporting them.
Yes.
That, to me, would tear our country apart.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. So why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours. They have contributed and built their lives in this country.
And some can stay, but some might go.
But this goes to the heart of who we are as a country.
Okay.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country, and that's why it's a really fundamental issue.
Do you think that he is caught in racist with this policy?
Well, look, I'm not going to start bandying.
Well, you called it a racist
policy. The policy.
So is he caught in racist with it?
I think the policy is racist. I think it's immoral, and I think I'll tell you, I've had so much sort of incoming communications about this. People from minorities in this country who feel more scared now than they've felt for years. It's sent a shiver down their throat. It has said to communities who thought they were part of what it is to be British that somehow they're not British. I think that's a very dangerous place for us to go as a country, and it goes against everything that I believe in.
Prime Minister, do you admire Nigel Farage as a politician?
I think he's a formidable politician, and Of course, I think he's the opponent as we go into the next election. I don't think it's going to be Labour versus the Tories.
Do you admire
it's going
him
to be
in any way?
It's going to be Labour against Reform. Look, I mean, he's a formidable politician. I'm not going to suggest otherwise. But fundamentally, what I don't admire is what he stands for, because I don't think he stands for the Britain that I know and I love.
Is he a dangerous politician? Do you think he is dangerous?
I think the fight at the next election is going to define us as a country for years to come. It is a really important political divide.
Do you think he's dangerous?
Well,
You've talked about it being a dangerous moment for the country. Do you think he's dangerous?
I think it's a dangerous moment for the country.
Do you think he's dangerous?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into labelling the man. I'm talking about the ideas and what he stands for and what I stand for.
So his ideas are dangerous?
Well, I think that taking our country down the road of toxic division, where you don't want to fix problems because if they're fixed, you lose your reason to exist. I think that is dangerous for our country.
His ideas are dangerous.
I think that what that road that takes us to toxic division of not fixing our problems, I think that's a dangerous road for us to go down. I also don't think this is just about Labour. I think there are plenty of people who may or may not vote Labour who believe in patriotism in our country, who do not want to see it torn apart in this way. And I don't like to see minorities in this country feeling as scared as they do at the moment about what is or could happen to their country.
I'm gently trying to interrupt because I've got such a short amount of time, so if you don't mind. You called this a fight. You called this fight a battle for the soul of the nation. Do you know which other leader used that phrase in recent years?
I don't. I set out...
It was Joe Biden.
Well,
it was Joe Biden
maybe
ahead of the midterms in 2022. He did a speech about a battle for the soul of the nation, exactly the same language.
Beth, what happened is I started on the speech in about July, crafting in my own mind the argument that I wanted to make. The argument I made in my conference speech is the argument I wanted to make about who I am, what I stand for, and what I believe this country is. So this speech came very much from me, not from anybody else.
The reason that I referenced Joe Biden is, do you see why some of your MPs are nervous as they look across the pond at a leader who said he could take the fight to what he saw as the populist right, Donald Trump, and he lost that battle and he stayed on too long and he paved the way to that victory? Can you see why your MPs might be nervous, some of your supporters nervous, that you're not the right guy for this fight?
Well, Beth, we had
Do you accept that?
Friday of last week, progressive leaders here from Canada, from Australia, from Norway, all of whom are centre-left politicians, all of whom had a battle against right-wing politics, and all of whom won.
Do you worry
and
that
I
you
think
might
our
not be
party
the right man?
looks to those battles and can see the battle. I think if in the hall for my conference speech, you will have seen just how unifying this was for the Labour movement.
I know about the hall, but out there, 30% of voters are saying they'll support Farage. Do you worry you might not be the right man for the job?
I won...
And that's nothing about your skills as a leader.
Let me answer that. Last year, in July, we won a mandate for changing this country. I led my party into that. Before that, I took over as leader of our party, and people said to me, "You're not the right person to change the party." I said, "Yes, I am," and we did it. Then people said to me, "You'll never win an election." We went on and got a landslide victory. Now they say to me, "You're not able to change the country." We will change the country, and I will be judged at the next election. We had a 5-year mandate on whether living standards are better, whether the health service is better, and whether people feel more safe and secure than they did when we came into office. I'll be rightly judged against those conditions, and I will be able to meet that test.
And Andy Burnham, should he just shut up?
Well, Andy Burnham is doing a fantastic job as the Mayor of Manchester. I actually work closely with him. We've reset that relationship between Westminster and our mayors, and we're working well together. So I've got no personal issue with Andy in the slightest.
OK, just want to ask you this. Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
OK.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been really clear that the idea that in London we're introducing Sharia law is rubbish.
Is it racist?
It's rubbish.
OK, you're not going to say it. So you criticise Farage for it, but not Farage. Donald Trump said Sadiq Khan was a terrible, terrible mayor, among the worst in the world, is he?
No, of course he's not. He's doing a very good job as Mayor of London. And in fact, serious crime is down. And again, whether it's Andy Burnham or Sadiq Khan, we work very closely with our mayors.
Okay.
But I also have a very good relationship with Donald Trump, the President of the United States. We have a good personal relationship, and we work on behalf of our countries extremely closely together. And it's very important for the United Kingdom that I do so.
You do work with him well, but did you believe him when he said at Chequers that he didn't know who Lord Mandelson was? Did you believe Donald Trump when he said that?
I can't answer for the President of the United States in relation to the answers he gives at press conferences.
The reason I'm asking you, and there's a serious point here, does it not bother you when he says things that you know are not truthful and you won't actually call it out?
Well, what matters to me is that the relationship between the US and the UK on defence and security and intelligence is the closest relationship in the world. It is what helps to keep us safe in this country. And therefore, of course, I work closely with the United States President. Of course, I have a good personal relationship with him. That is good for our country. And nothing that other people say or do is going to detract or deflect me from my duty, my responsibility to make sure that our country is safe, secure, and that we have that special relationship that we do.
Prime Minister, you will lead Labour into the next general election.
I will lead Labour into the next general election.
OK, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth Rigby talking to the Prime Minister there, and the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, hit back at the Prime Minister, accusing him of being unfit for the job. He said he used to think Sir Keir Starmer was a decent man, but has now been left shocked at his behaviour. We'll speak to Reform's head of policy, Zia Youssef, just after 8 o'clock to continue that debate. Now, the United Nations is urging the Taliban to restore internet and mobile access across Afghanistan after it imposed a blackout. The shutdown has left the country almost entirely cut off from the rest of the world. Nargis Nahan is a former Afghan politician who was forced to flee in 2021 when the Taliban took over and joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk us through your take on this internet blackout and what's driving it and how effective it is.
Well, as you know, connectivity is very much important outside the world, but also inside Afghanistan. The banking system is running based on connectivity, the transportation is running, the health services, e-commerce, everything. So since the internet shut down in Afghanistan, the banking system is not working, people are not able to get proper health services. Online education, which was the only tool that women had access to, are being paused. And on top of that, the whole service sector that people had access through internet are being paused. International flight to Afghanistan is being paused. And there are so many families that they're complaining that their family members needed money and they were supposed to transfer money for them from different countries. But now they don't have any means of communicating with their family. They don't know what happened to them and they cannot transfer money for them. So we can see that the whole country is being paused in the last 24 hours by the Taliban.
What is the Taliban saying is the reason they have done this, and what do you think the reason is yourself?
Well, based on the information that I have is that, there is no reason, there is no justification, there is no response from the Taliban from the Taliban themselves. But then in the meantime, there are also many of their own high-ranking officials at the minister and deputy minister level that even they are shocked because this instruction had come from Kandahar and they're being asked to immediately make it into effect and implement it. So many of the ministers do not know what is happening. Now, what is our impression? Why they're doing it is it's just because they've begun to realize after 4 years that connectivity and digital platforms are very effective tool that people are using for expressing themselves and for resisting the Taliban's regime. And then on top of that, it's also about isolation of a society and silencing of the society, so that they thought that the only tool that people have in expressing themselves and criticizing them and the regime, they can just cut that off and isolate people so that people don't know what is happening inside Afghanistan and people cannot raise their voice about what is happening inside Afghanistan.
Do you think it will work by the Taliban or backfire? Do you think in time, whether it'll take a long time or not, people will manage to reconnect, and when they do, they'll be sort of spurred on to express their opinion louder and clearer? Or will this work? Will the Taliban be able to contain free expression?
Well, as you know, Taliban had issued more than 120 decrees in the last 4 years, mainly targeting the very basic human rights of women, banning them from everything. There was a reaction, there was outcry, but there was no serious reaction because it was impacting women, but it was not impacting the rest of the society directly. It was impacting, of course, indirectly. So now the cut off the internet is not going to impact women only. It is going to impact the e-commerce, the business sector, the banking sector, the service sector. All sectors will be affected, and international flights will be affected. So there is going to be bigger impact. And then there is going to be reaction from the people, especially even if they find other means of getting connected. It's going to be much more costly than getting it through the telecom companies. So there is going to be reaction of the people, and I think exactly that's what the Taliban are afraid of. One thing that there was a huge rumor inside of Afghanistan based on a discussion that I had in the last few weeks with them that says Donald Trump has announced that they're going to take back Bagram. It sparked two reactions among Afghans. There were some people that their reaction was quite negative, saying that we don't want any occupation of our country again. But then there were also mass majority that they saw that as a spark for the hope, thinking that okay, there is going to be a chance for a profound change in Afghanistan. So I think that reaction also has scared Taliban because somehow they are trying to further isolate people, because they think that if there is that hope among the people created, that there is going to be support for resistance against the Taliban, the people will uprise against them.
Nargis Nahan, thank you so much for joining us. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to talk a little bit about the very wet weather that is expected to hit the UK over the course of the next few days.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich.
but now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. 2 hurricanes making their way across the Atlantic Ocean are set to bring heavy rain and strong winds to the UK this week. The west coast of Scotland is expected to face the brunt of the bad weather, with yellow weather warnings in place for rain from 5 o'clock today. Let's go live now to Alexander Burkhill from the Met Office. So, Alexander, people at home might be wondering why a storm thousands of miles away actually impacts us here, and in particular, the west coast of Scotland. What's going on?
Very good question, to be honest. And to be fair, we actually see this quite often. Deep areas of low pressure, hurricanes, tropical cyclones across the other side of the Atlantic. They move towards us and they can bring us different kinds of weather. It's not always wind and rain. Sometimes it's fine, sunny, warm weather that we get as a result of some hurricanes pushing in. But in this instance, it does look like the weather's going to turn even more unsettled as we go through this weekend. Now, you mentioned we do have some warnings across parts of Scotland at the moment. That's because we have a band of rain, a frontal system that's lingering through the next couple of days, leading to rainfall totals building up here. Then, as we go into the weekend, a deep area of low pressure is going to push in. And it's a tricky one, because this low is deepening as it comes towards the UK. It probably, may not have even reached its deepest phase until it comes very close to us. And that causes us some headaches, because until it's reached its deepest phase, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly how intense a feature it's going to be and exactly the track it's going to take. There are some question marks on that as well, but we are expecting some unsettled weather. Now, you mentioned the hurricanes. Yes, there are 2 hurricanes, Imelda, Umberto, the other side of the Atlantic. Them going to merge together through the next couple of days and actually weaken. But it's the influence of these hurricanes on that deep low that I mentioned coming towards the UK that adds extra uncertainty as to exactly where's going to be the wettest, where's going to be the windiest as we go through this weekend, and also just how wet and windy it's going to be. There's the potential it could be particularly wet and windy, or it could just be an unsettled autumnal day.
How long is it going to last? Do we know that yet?
Well, so the wet weather currently across parts of the northwest of the UK, that's going to last really through to the end of the week. And then the rain will push through at times across other places. Thursday night into Friday's looking a bit wet for quite a few spots. And then the low that comes through, depending on its exact track, it looks like it's going to be Friday into Saturday that we're going to see the most impactful weather. Like I say, there are some questions as to exactly the track that it takes. The most likely track is that the low is pretty deep and it tracks just to the north of the UK. If this comes off, then again, it's going to be parts of northwest Scotland where we see the strongest winds, but there will be heavy rain across much of the country as we go through Friday into Saturday. It probably won't last a particularly long period of time. We're talking 3 to 6 hours for many places, but it could be quite heavy and persistent. And whilst it will be windy, the strongest winds, we're talking severe gales, will be largely confined to northern parts of Scotland. Like I said, though, there's some uncertainty about the track that it could take. It could go a bit further south. If it goes a bit further south, chances are that it won't be quite as deep as if it stays just to the north of the UK. But if that happens, the very strong winds are going to be a bit more widespread. So more parts of England, Wales, Northern Ireland likely to see some significant, strong, potentially damaging winds, as well as the heavy rain. So the most likely track is that it stays just to the north of the UK, and the very strong winds are largely confined to northern Scotland. But it's not out of the question that it tracks a little bit further south, and in which case the damaging winds could be more widespread.
Alex, thanks so much.
Now, viewers on yesterday's show, they may remember that our entertainment correspondent Bethany Manel was off to interview Boyzone, and this was about their upcoming reunion tour. Now, a few things that I know about you. You love Arsenal, you've got a gorgeous toddler. I did not know you were a Boyzone fan.
Really all boy bands, British boy bands in that era, Boyzone, very high up on the list.
This I didn't know. I'm welcoming it. I'm loving it. But let's take a quick look at that interview that Bethany did with the boys.
Wilfred Frost, our breakfast presenter, turns out to be a massive Boyzone fan, and in particular, sorry lads, he's into Ronan. He loves your music. Ronan, he asked me to ask you, will you be playing any of your solo hits at the show?
At Boyzone? But no, we haven't, no.
We always do the Notting Hill one.
Oh, yeah, we could do that.
We have to do roller coasters as
Oh,
well.
OK, we do that as well.
Actually,
Yes,
the
answer is yes. The answer is yes. We're doing...
Anthony says if it's allowed.
Yes, we're doing... So, yes, the answer is we're doing all of my second album.
Ronan is supporting us on the
Yes,
night.
I'm going to come out before the band and I'm going to do a few songs and then I'll... No. But yes, might do a few songs. Thank you, Wilfred.
I love all of that. Thank you, Bethany, a lot for that. I also love that they weren't quite sure what songs they were going to play.
Yeah, but
It's sort of decided on the spot.
Beyond all of that, you've literally changed the course of the reunion tour.
Exactly.
So
there we go. I believe this is... So we've got a Boyzone song to hear us out, not a Ronan song.
Are you going to
but
sing
I
this?
actually love all of them. So for the other lads, you know, Bethany exaggerated it a bit. It's a mutual love for all of Boyzone members. As we go to break, when we come back, we'll have the day's top stories. But let's listen to Boyzone as we go.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on today's show. The Prime Minister sits down with Sky News after triggering a bitter war of words with Nigel Farage.
Plus, the Taliban shut down the internet in Afghanistan. We ask what it means for women to be cut off from the world.
It's Wednesday, the 1st of October. Your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer tells Sky News that he doesn't think Nigel Farage is a racist, but says he's pursuing a racist policy on immigration.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country.
Also ahead, Princess Anne makes a surprise visit to Ukraine in support of children affected by war. The US government shuts down after last-ditch negotiations fail and funding's cut off. Plus, we report on the growing campaign to throw Israel out of Eurovision over allegations of genocide in Gaza. A very good morning to you. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has insisted he does not believe Nigel Farage or his supporters are racist, but says they are pursuing racist policies on immigration. Sir Keir was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, after he used the keynote conference speech to accuse the Reform leader of hating Britain. The comments triggered an angry response from Nigel Farage and accusations that Labour is dragging politics into the gutter. Here's Beth's interview.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders. They're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. Why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours. They have contributed and built their lives in this country.
But some might go.
But this goes to the heart of who we are as a country.
Okay.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country, and that's why it's a really fundamental issue.
Do you think that he is caught in racist with this policy?
Well, look, I'm not going to start bandying.
You called it a racist
policy. The policy.
So is he caught in racist
well, look,
with it?
I think the policy is racist. I think it's immoral, and I think I'll tell you, I've had so much sort of incoming communications about this. People from minorities in this country who feel more scared now than they've felt for years. It's sent a shiver down their throat. It has said to communities who thought they were part of what it is to be British that somehow they're not British. I think that's a very dangerous place for us to go as a country, and it goes against everything that I believe in.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
Okay.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't
it's
it
nonsense.
racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been really clear that the idea that in London we're introducing Sharia law is rubbish.
Is it racist?
It's rubbish.
OK, you're not going to say it. So you'll criticise Farage for it, but not Farage. Donald Trump said Sadiq Khan was a terrible, terrible mayor, among the worst in the world, is he?
No, of course he's not. He's doing a very good job as Mayor of London. And in fact, serious crime is down. And again, whether it's Andy Burnham or Sadiq Khan, we work very closely with our mayors.
Okay.
But I also have a very good relationship with Donald Trump, the President of the United States. We have a good personal relationship, and we work on behalf of our countries extremely closely together.
Well, our political correspondent Mari Aurora joins us now from Liverpool at conference where she's been all week. And Mari, I guess a big part of yesterday and therefore what we should discuss today is the extent to which the Prime Minister did a good job, not just in his speech and the press interviews yesterday, but for the week as a whole. And one point I would say, I was just thinking as I was watching that, is we're not talking about the numbers of small boats, and we're not talking about inflation and the potential for tax increases in the budget. And in that sense, maybe this was a successful week for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if you speak to people, I mean, if you speak to MPs, they're pleasantly surprised from the Prime Minister's speech. Some of the delegates are also, you know, pleased with the kind of shift in tone and almost the kind of cranking up a gear from Keir Starmer in the speech yesterday. And so, actually, overall, considering how tough of a month it's been and going into conference, how difficult things were with Andy Burnham kind of on the airwaves talking about potential leadership challenges and still the kind of the long tail of the Rayner affair, the Peter Mandelson affair, the Paul Overton affair. Now, suddenly, as you say, we're talking about the NHS, we're talking about kind of this renewal image and, you know, skills and education, and that's really where the government want to be. So I think in some ways it has been a success. Of course, it's a party conference. You're talking to Labour delegates, Labour MPs. The most important thing is, can they really shift the dial when it comes to the British public, the general public, in terms of those kind of dissatisfaction numbers that we're seeing in the polls. And as much as, you know, the row about whether a policy is racist or not, whether a person is racist or not, creates a lot of headlines and stirs up a lot of anger and emotion, nonetheless, the cost of eggs in the shops is always going to be one of the most central focuses of the general public and therefore clearly the government. So I think for now, Keir Starmer lives to fight another day. He has done well. That speech has, to an extent, turned things around. MPs are talking about redemption, talking about the fact that actually there is a world in which Starmer remains leader for the rest of this parliament, and there is a world in which they can win the next election. And that's not the same kind of conversations I was having, for instance, on Sunday and Monday at Labour Party conference. But nonetheless, for now, so far, so good. I think it's a different story when everybody heads back to Westminster after party conference season is over, when we get that warm-up to the budget and potential difficult decisions that we keep hearing are coming down the track, and what that really means for people and people's lives.
Mari, great stuff. As always, Mari, there at conference for us, more coverage to come from there today. And on this programme, we'll be speaking to Zia Youssef, the Reform Head of Policy, in a few moments' time. Before that, though, Princess Anne has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky and paying tribute to the children killed in the conflict. Sky correspondent Olivia Guthrie joins us now to break this down for us. And Olivia, unsurprisingly, this has come out of the blue for various security considerations, but is the most high-profile royal family member to make such a visit?
Certainly since Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, visited last year. And obviously Prince Harry visited 2 weeks ago, but that was very much an unofficial visit. Princess Anne has visited Ukraine to very much highlight the plight of children and families in Ukraine. Perhaps the most poignant moment during her visit was when she laid a teddy bear at a memorial for children who've been killed in the conflict. And she told Ukraine's First Lady that her daughter Zara had the same teddy bear. Now, this visit comes 2 days after a deadly aerial bombardment by Russia killed 4 people, including a 12-year-old girl. More than 650 children have been killed so far in this conflict, and nearly 20,000 children have been forcibly deported by Russia in it too. Now, Princess Anne also went to meet President Zelensky to show Britain's support for Ukraine, and she gave him an envelope which had a red royal crescent on the back, so it appears to be a personal letter from the King. The Princess Royal also visited wounded soldiers, and she was given a tour of a rehabilitation centre where they're sent after they've been injured on the front line. All of this to show very much what the King was saying to President Trump during that state visit, that Britain is very much behind Ukraine, and so are the royal family.
Olivia, great stuff. Thanks so much. Let's get you up to speed on all the day's other stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. The United Nations mission to Afghanistan has urged the Taliban to immediately restore internet and mobile access across the country. The group imposed a nationwide blackout for the first time since coming to power in August 2021, with no explanation and no sign of how long it will last. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch is in Kabul and managed to get some internet access.
Here in Afghanistan, we are effectively in the middle of a blackout. The Taliban government has imposed a shutdown and it has restricted all access to the internet. People can't go online and nor can they make any calls, and it's had a major impact. It seems to have taken the country by surprise. Many caught off guard, including ordinary Afghans, big business, foreign officials and reportedly even some of the Taliban's own ministers. It came into effect on Monday evening and it is still in place. And we have not yet heard in any official capacity from the Taliban in any form of a statement or any explanation as to why this was put in place, nor when it might be lifted. And there are concerns amongst people we've spoken to that this could be indefinite. We were at Kabul International Airport yesterday where we saw dozens of families waiting for their loved ones to touch down, some also trying to take flights out of Afghanistan, but there were no international flights leaving or landing. Banks here are open, but we've been told their operating systems are not accessible. There are concerns amongst the international community that this is an attempt at widespread censorship and that it will severely restrict access to education in a country where girls over the age of 12 were banned from going to school. Many have been trying to learn online. Of course, they cannot access the internet to do that currently. Now, this shutdown follows about 10 days to 2 weeks of connectivity issues. The Taliban shutting down fibre optic internet access in some provinces. Now then, it was framed as an attempt to prevent immoral acts. This time round, we do not yet know the reasoning for this particular shutdown, which is nationwide. There is a lot of concern here amongst people. They simply don't know when they'll be able to contact families. They can't contact the emergency services. This is a country where many are reliant on remittances. That's money that's sent back to Afghanistan. No one is able to go through that process now either. And so we've heard from aid agencies. Amnesty International have called this a reckless act. The UN have tried to push the Taliban, encouraging them to lift these restrictions as soon as possible. They say it will cause great harm to ordinary Afghans. We don't yet know the intention behind it, nor how long it will last, but I think it is an indication of how quickly and how deeply the Taliban can reshape the future of this country.
Cordelia Lynch with the latest there from Kabul. Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning. Heavy shelling and large explosions have been seen in the Gaza Strip overnight. Hamas is under pressure to accept Donald Trump's peace plan, with Qatar, Egypt and Turkey urging them to agree the terms. Mr. Trump warns that if the plan is rejected, Israel will have free rein to, quote, do what they have to do. Meanwhile, the US government has shut down for the first time in almost 7 years hundreds of thousands of federal workers deemed not essential for protecting people or property could be furloughed or laid off after the shutdown began at midnight in the US. It comes after the Democrats and Republicans refused to budge in their standoff over health care spending. 5 unoccupied houses along North Carolina's Outer Banks have collapsed into the ocean as Hurricanes Humberto and Imelda continue their path towards Bermuda. People on the island are bracing themselves for what this might mean, and it comes after 2 people were killed in Cuba as a result of the storm. At least 69 people have been killed and more than 150 injured after an earthquake in central Philippines. The magnitude 6.9 quake has also caused widespread power outages and damage to building. And while there's no tsunami threat, multiple aftershocks have been recorded. The Spanish holiday islands of Ibiza and Formentera have been hit by widespread flooding, recording the most rain in a single day since 2015.
Now, the organisers of the Eurovision Song Contest are to hold a vote next month on whether Israel can take part after several countries threatened to boycott the competition. Spain, Ireland and Slovenia are among those who don't believe Israel should be allowed to take part until the war in Gaza ends. Arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer has this report.
For the last 2 years, away from the music, Eurovision has attracted scenes like these. While there's over half a year to go until the next contest, already countries are poised to vote. The issue in contention being whether Israel should be allowed to enter.
You can't avoid politics. If Israel is there, we won't be there.
As the world waits to see what happens with the negotiations over Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan, within the cultural world, there's no let-up in the increasing isolation of Israel. Slovenia, alongside broadcasters from Spain, the Netherlands, Ireland and Iceland, all threatening to boycott over the country's continued military action. Unless there's a sudden breakthrough, jolted into action by the controversy, the European Broadcasting Union, which runs the contest, has said it plans to hold a vote on Israel's participation, which will take place at an extraordinary meeting of the EBU's General Assembly, to be held online early next month.
The decision on whether to allow Israel into the contest by a popular vote is really unprecedented, and I think the situation is made even more complicated by the fact that the organisers themselves have allowed certain countries to, in a sense, get away with breaking the rules or deeming them to have not broken the rules sufficiently to allow participation.
In 2023, Israel was represented by their equivalent of Britney Spears, Noah Kirel, a major star. She came third, and while the singer gets that a lot has changed politically since then, she says it's unfair to punish the Israeli people for the actions of their government.
The voters understand that politics has no connection to this competition. So hopefully that people will understand that and respect that and could see the good side of it and not the bad side.
Regardless of the outcome of next month's vote, Ireland, Iceland and Slovenia have all said their plan to boycott will stand as long as Israel's still at war.
We are all somehow prisoner of German guilt. The people who are in the country, like leading the public service media in the countries, and they don't do anything, I think they will regret.
Israel's public broadcaster Kan has said its potential disqualification could have wide-ranging implications for the competition and the values for which the EBU stands. Pop bangers and power ballads aside, the criticism of the EBU has become deafeningly loud. The world waiting and watching for political decisions and cultural ones too. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
We're actually going to be joined at 9:30 by Billy Bragg to talk more about the Eurovision Song Contest. Let's pivot back to the top story of the day. And the Prime Minister has said he doesn't think Reform UK or their supporters are racist, but that their immigration policy is. Joining me is the head of policy at Reform UK, Zia Youssef. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us once again this week.
Good morning.
What did you make of the Prime Minister's speech yesterday?
Well, firstly, to that point, I think people watching this can draw their own conclusions. If somebody supports what, according to the Prime Minister, is a racist policy, by definition, they are racist. That's how he is calling our voters racist. I think what we have seen, though, over the last 48 hours is the most extraordinary, vindictive, vicious use of inflammatory language to demonise Nigel Farage, the man who Keir Starmer knows now he cannot beat at the ballot box, so has embarked on a campaign with his cabinet to incite violence against him. Keir Starmer is circling the drain. He knows that he can't beat Nigel at the ballot box. A Survation poll this week showed the majority of his own members want him replaced. There was another poll that said that he was literally the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. And how's he responded? He's called Nigel racist. He's called our supporters racist. We had 11 cabinet ministers on pretty much the same day use that exact language. The Deputy Prime Minister, in an extraordinary intervention, I've not seen anything like this in my lifetime in politics in this country, he said that Nigel flirted with Nazism, flirted with the Hitler Youth. And then you had the Home Secretary on the same day said that Nigel is, quote, worse than a racist. And the Prime Minister also used in his speech, he used language, he said, we need to, quote, go into battle. He called on his supporters to go into battle with, quote, the enemy, and said that Nigel and Reform represent a threat to everyone in this country. And using that language, he knows exactly what he's doing. And I want to share one last thing, very important information, which I thought long and hard about sharing. but I do think it's important that people know and the British public know. It was just 2 weeks ago that the authorities cut the size of Nigel's security by 75%. And it was, of course, 2 weeks ago, as people know, that we had the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, the most high-profile political assassination in recent memory. The Prime Minister knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box. We've seen the most extraordinary campaign over 48 hours to demonise Nigel, and he is absolutely inciting violence against him.
Well, there's a lot to get there. There's news to me about the cut in security, so I wasn't able to put that to the government when I spoke to them this morning. And to clarify, explicitly in his interview with Beth, the Prime Minister did say, whatever you might think it means, he did say he doesn't think your supporters are racist. I think the thing I'm going to pick up on, actually, is what you said at the end. And language is very important, and I think this week, more than ever, we're all focused on how important language is. Yeah, inflammatory might be a legitimate word, but inciting violence, which is, you said a few times and you concluded with that thought, is encouraging others to commit an unlawful act of violence.
Yep.
He did not do that.
So in security circles, there's a concept called stochastic terrorism. This is well understood in security circles. I appreciate it's a bit of a technical, arcane term, so I'll try and explain it very briefly. It is where somebody uses a big megaphone to launch a very public demonisation campaign using inflammatory language in pursuit of encouraging a random act of violence against the target. The fact that, and this is not one, errant comment at a fringe event at a conference, not even two errant comments. It is the Prime Minister with the biggest megaphone in the country across every major broadcaster, including this one, using the most inflammatory language possible, and then 11 of his cabinet members coming out and one-upping him on that. I will tell you this, as someone who's a friend of Nigel's, and I thought long and hard about whether I should share that information about Nigel's security. And I want to be clear that donors have stepped in to ensure, thankfully, that Nigel is well protected, and so, reform supports. And frankly, any right-thinking people in this country who think politics should be debated around the actual policies, we should be talking about issues and not using this kind of inflammatory, directly insightful language. I have stood next to Nigel as he's been attacked by masked lunatics from Antifa. I've seen them try to attack Nigel. I've seen them try to attack our supporters, our volunteers, our activists. That's why we're so appalled by this behaviour. The Prime Minister, who's supposed to be a human rights lawyer, should know far better than this. He knows he can't beat Nigel at the ballot box, so he's resorted to inflammatory vilification to incite violence against him.
Well, I mean, look, I can't speak for the government. I think on the point that he's saying you just said that he's intentionally trying to incite violence. I'm sure that they would say loud and clear, in fact, they have already, that that's not the case.
Well, if that's the case, he should come out and apologise for using that inflammatory language. Even when David Lammy accused Nigel of flirting with Nazism, he still couldn't bring it upon himself to actually apologise.
And I had a very clear conversation with Pat McFadden about the David Lammy comments. Every single other comment has been about a policy.
With respect, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, said that Nigel was worse than a racist. So with respect, I need to correct you on that. You just said every other comment has been about the policy. The Home Secretary, no less, said that Nigel is, quote, worse than a racist.
The government obviously would say that their intention here is to beat Nigel Farage at the ballot box. They're focusing on a policy that they argue is racist. And we're going to get to that policy after this final question on this, because I think it's important, even though we spoke about it on Monday. You concluded that last answer by saying he was intentionally inciting violence. Are you saying that, I've held the former Science Minister, Peter Kyle, to account when he tried to liken Nigel Farage to Jimmy Savile. It was a massive leap. Are you really coming on here to say you think the Prime Minister wants harm to come to Nigel Farage? Because language is important.
Nigel, well, let me be clear.
That's how your last answer concluded that.
So,
do you retract that, or do you stand by it?
Nigel is a close friend of mine. I think he's the future Prime Minister of this country. He's the bookmaker's favourite to be the next Prime Minister in this country, and he's well ahead in the polls. So the stakes are too high for me to mince my words. I think Keir Starmer knows that he cannot beat Nigel Farage at the ballot box. He cannot beat reform at the ballot box. And yes, I think that he has decided to embark on a campaign that is clearly, he knows, insightful of violence against him.
I think that sounds like an enormous leap to most people, but you didn't answer my question. Are you saying you think the Prime Minister wishes harm on Nigel Farage?
I think that he has embarked on a campaign of language specifically...
Please answer the question. Do you think the Prime Minister wishes harm on Nigel Farage? This is really important to clarify.
I think that he knows that he cannot beat him at the ballot box, so has decided to use this inflammatory language, along with his cabinet, to incite violence against him.
So you're saying he wishes harm on Nigel Farage, is what you're saying?
You need to ask Keir Starmer that, but I think if you look at the language, and again, I want to put this to you, you just said that, again, this is not a single errant comment. This is the government of the United Kingdom talking about a man who is the bookmaker's favourite to be the next Prime Minister.
It's an
and
enormously...
you just said, it is...
I'm sorry, it's an enormous... It's an enormous leap.
If I suggest you go and look up what stochastic terrorism is. And if you use language like battle, encourage your supporters to, quote, go into battle with, quote, an enemy that is a threat to our way of life in this country. You say that he flirted with Nazism, and 11 cabinet members come out and call him racist in the context of all of the threats that I see, sadly, almost every day against Nigel. Just this morning, I was in the car here, there's someone on Twitter who said that a sniper rifle could stop Nigel Farage and was probably the only thing that could. David Bull has just pushed that tweet out. I'm sorry, I have seen people try to attack Nigel, try to attack our supporters and our members. So I take great issue with the notion that this is some great leap. The Prime Minister, if you think that this is such an outrageous thing, then you should ask yourself...
I will.
You should ask the Prime Minister directly why 11 of his cabinet ministers have all come out in a 48-hour period.
And I focused very clearly with Pat McFadden about the comments of David Lammy. I'm going to look up this obscure definition of terrorism, but essentially what you're saying by repeating that to me is not only do you say that you think the Prime Minister wishes harm on Nigel Farage, you're basically saying you think he's a terrorist.
Here's what I think. There are millions of people in this country who, if anything was to happen to Nigel Farage, will hold the Prime Minister squarely responsible for his actions.
Well, thankfully, that's not happened. I don't believe, and nobody wishes that, and I think that's the point. Nobody wishes that to happen.
You can't truly know somebody's intent unless you are that person, or unless you've really had that conversation
and that's what I'm asking you.
But what I'm telling you, what I'm telling you is, if I look at the preponderance of evidence of how somebody who is a human rights lawyer, who uses language extremely carefully. Frankly, for most of the time, the language is literally put in front of him by a SPAD, and he reads from an auto cue because he doesn't even know what he believes. For 11 cabinet members to come out one after the other inside a 24-hour period using the most inflammatory political language I can remember in this country, I'm afraid my personal assessment of it is, yes, the Prime Minister has embarked, because he knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box, he has embarked on a campaign to incite violence against him. That is my personal opinion.
You've just said you can't possibly guess what's in somebody's mind.
I said you can't truly know. I can absolutely have my opinion, and people watching this programme can form their own opinion.
And yet you're trying to claim you know what's in the Prime Minister's mind to quite an extraordinary degree.
But when was the last time you saw when was the last time you saw a political leader with a real shot at Downing Street accused of this sort of language inside a 48-hour period from the government of the day? I defy you. Give me an example of that.
I'm not sure I have, but that's still an extraordinary...
So we're in unprecedented territory.
But that's a very different point.
We're in unprecedented territory.
That's a very, very, very different point to accusing the Prime Minister of wishing harm on an opponent and accusing the Prime Minister of being a terrorist.
If he did wish harm, then his actions are indistinguishable from somebody who did wish harm.
The vast majority...
And that is the fundamental point. What I care about is the safety of my friend.
That's not what you've said.
What I care about
that's not what you've said. In a week where language is more important than ever, that is not what you said.
I have said... I've been very clear about what my opinion is. And my opinion is that Keir Starmer knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box and therefore has taken it upon himself with his cabinet to embark on a campaign to incite violence against him.
I want to bring this back to the policy, because this is where we started. And we spoke about some of this on Monday. You want to get rid of ILR, but you're still giving a route to citizenship after 7 years. But you made clear that those people, if they want to take British citizenship, have to renounce their other citizenships. On Monday, you clarified that would apply to some countries, but not others. If somebody wants to come here, go through all of the hoops, meet all of the requirements that you set out, they pay taxes, they speak English fluently, whatever else, to qualify to be British, and they come from America, then they are allowed to maintain their pride at being American and keep their American citizenship. But if they come from another country, you haven't named which ones yet, somewhere from Africa, one assumes, someone from Middle East, one assumes, they are not allowed to maintain their pride at where they came from and keep that citizenship. That is judging people surely not on merit, but on race.
That's not the case at all. Well, first of all, American isn't a race. That would be the first point to make. And
But if someone...
the notion that America was a race would be a surprise to most Americans. But let me be clear about something. Everything we have put in that policy, right, is about making sure that to the degree that there is legal migration in this country, that legal migration is in the interests of the British people. That is for the betterment of the way of life and the quality of life of British people.
But if someone has met every single requirement you set out on merit, they fully qualify to be a citizen.
Yeah.
If they're from America, they can have 2 citizenships and remain proud to be American as well as British. But if they're from somewhere else, they cannot.
Hold on. So again, you said language is important. So America does allow dual citizenships. Americans, if you want to become an American citizen, you do have to take an oath that specifically renounces. So when you talk about being, being dually prideful,
you can have both passports.
You can have both passports, but the Americans require you to take an oath that pledges allegiance to the stars and stripes.
It doesn't renounce the citizenship.
But you used specific language there. You said that they can be equally proud. That is not what the Americans allow. And what we're saying is we have to ensure that to the degree that there is legal migration in this country, it is in the interests of the British people. You know what's really interesting? All the questions are always put to us about these policies. Every single time, it is always about the interests of citizens of foreign countries. The question is never... I genuinely cannot remember, having done the media rounds now for the last few days, somebody putting me a question about the interests of the people watching this programme who wake up, go to work, pay their taxes. Who's looking out for them? We've had decades now of governments in this country who seem to think that their primary responsibility is the welfare of foreign citizens. And I'm sorry, that is not the case. The government of the United Kingdom, their sworn oath is to look after the interests of British people. That is what our policy does.
I think it's sort of crazy to think that people will accept citizenship if they have to renounce a citizenship, and you're clearly judging different countries differently on that regard. I'm being told from all angles
but it's also
that we're out of
one
time.
of the reasons we have to do that is
wrap.
because a lot of countries literally do not allow you. There's no mechanism to renounce citizenship. So that's another important point.
We are out of time. We always thank people coming on and being open. So Zia Yusuf, thank you as always for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you, the head of policy at Reform UK. We're going to take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. We'll be back with more shortly.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Joining me now from the Labour conference in Liverpool, former Labour Director of Policy under Jeremy Corbyn, Andrew Fisher, and Sir Keir Starmer's biographer and former Labour advisor, Tom Baldwin. A very good morning to you both. We've got lots to discuss, guys, but as I understand it, you were watching that interview there, and clearly one of the big talking points of the week and of the Prime Minister's speech yesterday has been the use of this word racism towards a reform policy. Tom, I guess your reaction first to that use, that tactic by Labour and the government this week, and the debate I had just there with Zia Youssef.
It's not a tactic. What Keir Starmer said yesterday, and indeed at the weekend, was from the heart. That was Keir Starmer, the decent, moderate man I know, speaking quite emotionally about a policy proposed by Reform, which would see hundreds of thousands of people who have been here legally in this country, working, paying their taxes, legally here for years, part of their community, rounded up in vans, deported. That would tear this country apart. And when the Prime Minister denounced that as racist yesterday, it felt like almost like a handbrake had been taken off. That was a Labour Prime Minister speaking Labour values. And, you know, if Labour can't call that out as racist, then there shouldn't be a Labour Party. That was a huge moment. It's really, really important. And when I hear Reform now accusing the Prime Minister of sowing division without any sort of big red warning lights all on your TV saying, irony alert, because that's what Reform do. They want to divide this country. That's why I think Keir Starmer's quite right to say, if you want to divide this country, if you want to rip up the fabric of our communities, you don't love this country. You're not a patriot.
Andrew, your take?
Yeah, look, I think it's ludicrous that Zia Youssef is on there accusing Keir Starmer of inciting violence. It's not that. He called out a policy for what it was. It was racist, and it's right to do that. It was right that we did it when Theresa May was sending go-home vans around parts of London. You know, that's racist as well. People, politicians who whip up division and then cry wolf. I mean, Nigel Farage has just been a snowflake over this, to be frank. You know, he needs to pull himself together. There was no threat to him. He criticised the one policy Reform have got, which is basically, hate migrants, and he called him out for it, and good on him for doing it. And it's taken far too long, frankly, for Keir Starmer to do that. But yesterday he drew a line and he did it well.
Of course, Reform doesn't frame and believe the policy to be as you just framed it in the brief there. Does it, just to round things off, Tom?
I don't think there's any other way you can describe it. And
Well, you can't say they hate migrants. I mean, the language is important this week.
They just want to deport them.
They want to round them up, put them in vans, rip them out of their families, their homes, their communities, and send them off somewhere else. I think most people would interpret that as hating them.
Yeah.
Well, again, to go back to a central part of my last argument is, you certainly can't speak for what's in people's minds. I think we'll lose track on this. I guess the final question, Tom, on this is, does it undermine the Prime Minister and the higher moral ground he was seemingly trying to take in his speech yesterday when David Lammy, for example, and I think this was clear in my argument with Zia Youssef when people have criticised the policy versus the individual, when David Lammy didn't stick to that line and made it personal?
David Lammy can speak for himself. I think what was impressive about yesterday was the Prime Minister, rather than being this sort of defensive, contorted crouch, which I think sometimes he's seemed to have been in over the last year, sort of trying to say, well, maybe, Reform has a point here, or maybe Nigel Farage has a point there. Actually, just to talk straight to the public, talk straight to the party about what's at stake now. Because Reform isn't some sort of moderate makeover of the Conservative Party. It represents something completely different that we've not seen before in this country. A populist, far-right party with a real prospect of power. And that is scary. And if we can't sort of tell the party what that means, what would that mean to this country, tell voters about that. People may not like everything about this government. They may not like everything about Keir Starmer. But the choice, politics is always a choice between better and worse. And you now have the prospect of Nigel Farage bringing the politics of Donald Trump, all that division, all that anger into our system. And I think people who love this country should be really, really worried about that. And there is now a real prospect, I think, because of what Keir Starmer said, of decent, moderate, tolerant people coming together to stop that happening. I hope it does.
Andrew, let's talk about the conference as a whole and the other parts that have come out of it. One part which was fascinating, I forget which day it was, I guess it was just Monday, but it feels like a long time ago, when Rachel Reeves on in the morning and Darren Jones then a few hours later on with Sophie and Beth. And this phrase has come out, the manifesto pledge stand today. What does that mean? And is it a sort of legitimate argument to make? Because it could imply, oh, my promises stand until I break them.
Yeah, look, if you make a manifesto pledge, and you've got to be careful making manifesto pledges, the idea is they stand for a 5-year parliament, and if they break that, then people will judge them on it. And I think the problem for Labour, and I said this before the election when I was on Sky as well, is that they went into the election with a manifesto that just wasn't up to the times we were in. They had a terrible inheritance from the Tories, and they didn't have a manifesto that would counter some of the policies and put right the agenda that they faced. And they've had to do things that weren't in their manifesto, whether it was the £40 billion worth of tax rises in the first budget, or things that I'm not keen on, like ID cards or digital ID that they've announced recently. Again, that wasn't in the manifesto. So I worry about that. They did make a pledge to people that they wouldn't raise national insurance on workers or income tax or VAT. I think they should stick by that. There are other taxes that can be raised that can raise revenue for public services, and I hope they look at some of those. But I think it undermines trust if you break your manifesto pledges. Don't make them in the first place if you can't stick by them for 5 years. And that, I think, would be my message to them, because it is where I agree with you. It was quite mealy-mouthed, especially what Darren Jones said, and I think people will be concerned. So I think they could do with coming out and clarifying that.
Tom, I'm interested in your take. There are some arguments. If you've got to raise a lot of tax, that there are very legitimate economic arguments to now pull the big tax levers instead of fiddling with lots of little ones. If that's the direction we're heading, have they missed yet another comms opportunity to give people fair warning of that, alongside many others earlier this year when Donald Trump imposed tariffs and the like? Do you think we're headed for that, and do you think they've handled the comms of that poorly, if so?
I think there were moments after the election when they could have said to the British people, look, financial situation they've inherited is far worse than they expected. I mean, this inheritance of failing public services, failing public finances, failing public trust is really tricky. And I think they've leant over backwards to stick to the manifesto promises of VAT, income tax and national insurance, almost to the point where people think they've broken their promises. They've stuck to the letter of the promise without necessarily spirit, because people think there's been a kind of Labour's been doing things which a Labour government shouldn't do, like trying to cut disability benefit or taking winter fuel allowance away. And I think where they are now, there's a lot of anger about the OBR, this is the Office of Budget Responsibility, who are now retrospectively changing the way productivity growth is calculated. Now, that's got nothing to do with this government. It's not any mistake this government's made, but they now have to find another £20 billion, probably more than £20 billion, in order to make up that shortfall. So, you've had Donald Trump putting tariffs, you've had the economy across the world having an impact from that. And, make manifesto promises. I don't know whether they'll be able to stick to it this time. We'll have to wait and see. They may find other ways of raising money, as Andrew says, but there does come a point when you have to say to the British people, look, things have changed. We didn't think that Donald Trump was going to, cause havoc with the world economy. We didn't think the OBR were going to change, cost us another £20 billion, and that may mean we have to raise some other tax. We'll see.
Andrew, Tom, pleasure as always. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the final bits of conference.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, the United Nations is urging the Taliban to restore internet and mobile access across Afghanistan after it imposed a nationwide blackout. The shutdown has left the country almost entirely cut off from the rest of the world. Let's speak to our world presenter, Yada Hakim, who, of course, knows the country well, knows the issues at hand incredibly well. Yada, very good morning to you. Just get our viewers up to speed on how the Taliban are framing this. What's their claim as to why they've done it? But I guess more importantly, the real-world implications of it.
Yeah, well, good morning. And you and I have spoken about this issue on a number of occasions, whether it's been girls banned from school, women prevented from leaving their homes, even coming out to, I'm here this morning at a park in London. Women in Afghanistan cannot take their children to the local park. I mean, they're basically tried in many ways to punish the women and girls of the country in a massive way. And now they've decided a blanket sort of punishment of everything in the country. And the way that they laterally by the Supreme Leader, who is based in Kandahar, apparently he has just decided that, he's going to do this. And the justification he's made for it is that he doesn't want people to access things like pornography and things that he deems as so-called haram or against his version of Sharia law. And so this is the way that they have framed it. Now, as you say, the real world implications of this is massive. I looked at a map this morning of the flight paths, and there are literally planes that can't cross, over the skies of Afghanistan. Nothing is taking off, nothing is incoming. And, beyond that, when you think about hospitals, when you think about the fact that so many of the women and girls that I've been talking to you about, in the last few minutes, were accessing education online in secret schools. Even the boys in the country, were learning a lot online through the internet. So this is collective punishment by the Taliban leader. And what we're now seeing is, we've often spoken about the fact that the Taliban, after they came into power 4 years ago, plunged the country into darkness. They've literally turned the lights off now.
In terms of the chance it comes back, I mean, maybe this is wildly wishful thinking, Yalda, but is this the type of thing that could backfire against the Taliban? Because at some point, we hope connectivity will be restored, or is that wishful thinking? But when it is, people will surely talk about the unreasonable nature of this step.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that we found is that over the course of the last 4 years, when I have travelled into the country after the Taliban took power, people have told me they're so tired of war. Even when Allied forces, the US-led invasion took place, there were suicide bombings on a daily basis in the capital, Kabul, in other provinces across the country. So even though people are unhappy with the Taliban and they know they don't have their basic human rights, what they have at the moment is this tight security where there aren't suicide bombings. People can travel across the country more freely when they couldn't before. Now, the argument that many are making is the reason there is security is because it was the Taliban, launching these suicide bombings, and they're now in control, therefore not attacking anyone. But I do think that eventually the Supreme Leader will be forced to turn the internet back on, because he will realize, and those around him will realize, and the rest of the Taliban will realize, and there will be international pressure from the likes of the United Nations, perhaps Western, pressure as well, because essentially they have been cut off. The medical supplies, the hospitals, the schools, air travel, they will realize this is having serious implications on the entire country.
Yada, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us, Yada Hakim there. More, of course, as always, on The World, 9 p.m. on Sky News. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, concerns that focusing on asylum seeker violence is distracting from the real threat to women's safety.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders. It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbours, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical. Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history. The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbours that harbour decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day. Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate. It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Ooh. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
They call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Senior police officer in charge of preventing violence against women and girls says she's concerned the conversation around asylum seekers is distracting from the real threat to women's safety. Well, Sky's Molly Malone reports, and just a warning, her story contains references to suicide.
For much of the summer, there was protest, as communities made clear they're unhappy with levels of immigration. There was also this. As an asylum seeker was convicted for the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl in Epping.
I'm not far right, I'm just right. And we have to protect women and girls.
And with the protest came the politics.
Young, undocumented males who pose a risk to women and girls.
This is a border security crisis, but it is also a public safety crisis, especially for women and girls.
Now, the officer responsible for policing violence against women and girls has expressed concern about the conversation.
You hear a lot about small boats and asylum seekers and the threat to women and girls, and certainly that is how many people are feeling in communities at the moment. What do you make of that political conversation?
I'm concerned that the message could get missed in the current political discourse, which is where does the real threat come from? It's from a multitude of things. And as we know, for sexual offences and for domestic abuse, the vast majority of perpetrators are known to the victim, so I don't want anything to distract from a clear and good understanding of where the threat overall is.
That comes as police warn of fears about funding, that work like this in Manchester, a new pilot to improve protection checks in domestic abuse cases, can be effective but comes at a cost, while the sector in general is said to be struggling. In a letter from the Victims Commissioner to the Justice Secretary and shared with Sky News, Baroness Newlove said she's concerned that support for victims is slipping behind other priorities, that victim services are financially at breaking point, with cuts that are directly impacting victims' safety.
Without it, I don't know where I'd be.
completely honest with you, I have attempted suicide.
Ria was raped when she was a teenager. It wasn't until years later that she sought counselling, but faced months on a waiting list.
Me personally, it was an a realisation, I should say, that I can't do this by myself. I've been trying for a number of years and not necessarily getting anywhere.
The chief executive at this rape crisis centre in London says the sector is struggling to meet increasing demand, while 3 centres have shut in the last year because of a lack of funding.
Dire, crisis point, broken. Quite frankly, people are dying.
The government told us they inherited a £22 billion black hole, but say they remain resolute in their mission to halve violence against women and girls. Their upcoming strategy will set out how they'll protect the most vulnerable. There appear to be challenges and concerns everywhere, a system and a sector under pressure, with a warning that victims of crime are paying the price. Molly Malone, Sky News.
And if you've been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans at any time, 116123, or email joe@samaritans.org. In addition to that, if you suspect you're being abused and need to speak to someone, there are people who can help. The National Domestic Violence Helpline is on 0808 2000 247.
Right, let's have a quick look at the weather before we leave you. Well, northern and western parts can expect rain over the next few days, while the southeast looks mainly dry. It's looking potentially stormy for the weekend. It's already wet for parts of the north and west, but most other places are fine, with early fog patches soon lifting. Southern Britain will stay mainly dry through the morning with pleasant sunny spells. The rest of Britain, Ireland and Northern Ireland will remain quite cloudy with further outbreaks of rain, locally heavy. It'll be windy in the north and west too. The afternoon will be similar, but northern England will see occasional rain clearing later on. The windy north and west will see further rain overnight, heavy in places, but elsewhere it'll stay largely dry with a few fog patches forming. That's your weather. We're going to take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, we'll have all of the day's top stories for you.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on today's show. The Prime Minister sits down with Sky News after triggering a furious war of words with Nigel Farage and Reform.
Plus, the end of the early morning rush for a GP's appointment. We'll speak to a doctor about the new system and what it will mean for patients.
It's Wednesday, the 1st of October. Your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer tells Sky News that he doesn't think Nigel Farage is a racist, but says he's pursuing a racist policy on immigration.
I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country.
Also ahead, Princess Anne makes a surprise visit to Ukraine in support of children affected by war. The US government shuts down after last-ditch negotiations fail and funding is cut off. Plus,
she ran away from home in a mother's best coat. She was married before she was even...
And we'll speak to singer Billy Bragg about the growing campaign to throw Israel out of Eurovision over allegations of genocide in Gaza. Good morning to you. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has insisted he does not believe Nigel Farage or his supporters are racist, but says they are pursuing racist policies on immigration. Sir Keir was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, after he used his keynote conference speech to accuse the Reform leader of hating Britain. The comments triggered furious response from Reform, with Zia Youssef telling this programme that the Prime Minister was using inflammatory language because they can't win at the ballot box. Here's Beth's interview.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders, they're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. So why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours. They have contributed and built their lives in this country.
But some might go.
But this goes to the heart of who we are as a country. I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country, and that's why it's a really fundamental issue.
Do you think that he is caught in racist with this policy?
Well, look, I'm not going to start bandying...
well, you called it a racist policy.
The policy...
So is he caught in racist with it?
I think the policy is racist. I think it's immoral. And I think... I'll tell you, I've had so much sort of incoming communications about this. People from minorities in this country who feel more scared now than they've felt for years. It's sent a shiver down their throat. It has said to communities who thought they were part of what it is to be British that somehow they're not British. I think that's a very dangerous place for us to go as a country, and it goes against everything that I believe in.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not. That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been really clear that the idea that in London we're introducing Sharia law is rubbish.
Is it racist?
It's rubbish.
OK, you're not going to say it. So you'll criticise Farage for it, but not Farage. Donald Trump said Sadiq Khan was a terrible, terrible mayor, among the worst in the world, is he?
No, of course he's not. He's doing a very good job as Mayor of London. And in fact, serious crime is down. And again, whether it's Andy Burnham or Sadiq Khan, we work very closely with our mayors. But I also have a very good relationship with Donald Trump, the President of the United States. We have a good personal relationship, and we work on behalf of our countries extremely closely together.
We put some of those comments from the Prime Minister to Zia Youssef of Reform last hour. Here's a small taste of what he had to say.
I think what we have seen, though, over the last 48 hours is the most extraordinary, vindictive, vicious use of inflammatory language to demonise Nigel Farage, the man who Keir Starmer knows now he cannot beat at the ballot box, who has embarked on a campaign with his cabinet to incite violence against him. Keir Starmer is circling the drain. He knows that he can't beat Nigel at the ballot box. A Survation poll this week showed the majority of his own members want him replaced. There was another poll that said that he was literally the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. And how's he responded? He's called Nigel racist.
Zia Youssef last hour in what was extended and quite contentious conversation. Mari joins us now from conference. And Mari, I'm not sure what you made of the conversation there, but I think the implication from Zia Youssef, which I pressed him on repeatedly and I guess he didn't rule out, was that the Prime Minister's intentionally trying to incite violence against Nigel Farage.
It was an interesting interview, wasn't it? I mean, Zia Youssef didn't want to explicitly say that. He just repeated the line around incitement to violence and accused the Prime Minister of inciting violence against Farage and really Reform supporters. And the difficulty is that on one hand, one could argue that perhaps the ramping up of the rhetoric from Keir Starmer has ruffled a few feathers in the Reform camp, and perhaps actually Labour will be slightly pleased with that, feeling like they maybe are putting Reform on the back foot. On the other hand, others might argue, actually, do we want to be going down this road where this fight kind of with the gloves off, as it were, and it's only going to potentially end in tears? Again, back onto the other hand, some may argue that actually Reform often use quite incendiary language themselves, have often been accused of some quite extreme rhetoric in cases, and therefore actually they can give it but they can't take it. So it depends on where you stand on this. And obviously there's been, accusations of Reform essentially complaining about hurty words when they often accuse the left of getting upset about hurty words. So this row is kind of unfolding in a bizarre way where there's a lot of finger pointing from all different directions as to who's the bad person, who's the bad politician in this. But I think putting the whole row aside for a second, clearly Keir Starmer is trying to show his delegates here in Liverpool and his MPs that he can get a bit more aggressive when it comes to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Labour MPs are incredibly worried about Reform, especially obviously in those seats where either they've got very small majorities and or the next person below them in the general election when it comes to the vote share in their seat was Reform. And so there are a huge number of Labour MPs who are genuinely alive to the threat of Reform in the next general election, looking at those polls and thinking to themselves, goodness gracious, we have got to do something more, which is why we are seeing Keir Starmer in this past week really start to attack Nigel Farage. I mean, he's talking about Nigel Farage and Reform more than he was before. And again, we don't know yet, is that going to be a good thing and demonstrate that actually he can really kind of attack Reform and its policies? Or is it going to end up giving Reform more airtime and essentially just making people say Nigel Farage's name more and more and more? And in that case, does that essentially feed Reform and give them more oxygen? So it depends on where you sit with your views on this. But Labour clearly feel that the best thing to do is to tackle it head on and to talk about it rather than perhaps trying to ignore Reform and hoping that they will just go away.
Mari, great stuff. And we look forward to further coverage from conference throughout the day here on Sky News from Mari and the team there. Now, moving on, Princess Anne has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky and paying tribute to the children killed in the conflict. Sky correspondent Olivia Guthrie joins me now with this. And I guess this came as a surprise to us all for obvious reasons, the security restrictions. But this is as high-profile a royal visit to Ukraine as we've seen.
Indeed, and it's the first visit since Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, visited last year. And obviously, Prince Harry also visited about 2 weeks ago, but that was very much an unofficial visit. The Princess Royal yesterday very much wanting to highlight the plight of children and families in Ukraine, very poignantly leaving a teddy bear at a memorial for children who have been killed in this conflict. And she told the Ukrainian First Lady that her daughter Zara had the same teddy bear. Now, this visit comes 2 days after a deadly Russian aerial strike on Kyiv left 4 dead at least, including a 12-year-old girl. Now, 650 children have died so far as a result of this invasion, and 20,000 children have been forcibly deported by Russia. The Princess Royal also meeting President Zelensky yesterday, and she gave him an envelope which had a red royal crescent on it, which is thought to be a personal letter from the king to Zelensky. She also met with wounded soldiers and was given a tour of a rehabilitation clinic to treat them after they have been injured on the front line. Now, this is very much to show that the royal family are backing the king in what he said to President Trump during the state visit, where he said that Britain and America both need to work hard together to secure peace for Ukraine.
Olivia, good stuff. Thank you so much. Let's get up to speed now on the other top stories of the day. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. We'll take viewers to the very latest now in Gaza. Heavy shelling and large explosions have been seen in the Strip. These latest pictures from overnight. Hamas is under pressure to accept Donald Trump's peace plan with Qatar, Egypt and Turkey, urging them to agree to the terms. Mr. Trump warns that if this plan is rejected, Israel will have free rein to, quote, do what they have to do. The US government has been shut down for the first time in almost 7 years. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers deemed not essential for protecting people or property could be furloughed or laid off after the shutdown began at midnight in the US. It comes after the Democrats and Republicans refused to budge in their standoff over health care spending. 5 unoccupied houses along North Carolina's Outer Banks have collapsed into the ocean as hurricanes Humberto and Imelda continue on their path towards Bermuda. People on the island are bracing themselves for these massive storms, and it comes after 2 people were killed in Cuba as a result of the storm. At least 69 people have been killed and more than 150 injured after an earthquake in the central Philippines. The magnitude 6.9 quake has also caused widespread power outages and damage, of course, to buildings. And while there's no tsunami threat, multiple aftershocks have been recorded. And the Spanish holiday islands of Ibiza and Formentera have been hit by widespread flooding. Incredible pictures here. And most of the rain came in a single day, and this is the most since 2015.
Now, the senior police officer in charge of preventing violence against women and girls says she's concerned the conversation around asylum seekers is distracting from the real threat that women face. Sky's Molly Malone has this report and a warning her story contains references to suicide.
For much of the summer, there was protest, as communities made clear they're unhappy with levels of immigration. There was also this, as an asylum seeker was convicted for the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl in Epping.
I'm not far right, I'm just right. And we have to protect women and girls.
And with the protest came the politics.
Young, undocumented males who pose a risk to women and girls.
This is a border security crisis, but it is also a public safety crisis, especially for women and girls.
Now, the officer responsible for policing violence against women and girls has expressed concern about the conversation.
You hear a lot about small boats and asylum seekers and the threat to women and girls, and certainly that is how many people are feeling in communities at the moment. What do you make of that political conversation?
I'm concerned that the message could get missed in the current political discourse, which is where does the real threat come from? It's from a multitude of things. And as we know, for sexual offences and for domestic abuse, the vast majority of perpetrators are known to the victim. So I don't want anything to distract from a clear and good understanding of where the threat overall is.
That comes as police warn of fears about funding. That work like this in Manchester, a new pilot to improve protection checks in domestic abuse cases, can be effective but comes at a cost, while the sector in general is said to be struggling. In a letter from the Victims Commissioner to the Justice Secretary and shared with Sky News, Baroness Newlove said she's concerned that support for victims is slipping behind other priorities, that victim services are financially at breaking point, with cuts that are directly impacting victims' safety.
Without it, I don't know where I'd be, completely honest with you. I have attempted suicide.
Ria was raped when she was a teenager. It wasn't until years later that she sought counselling, but faced months on a waiting list.
Me personally, it was an a realisation, I should say, that I can't do this by myself. I've been trying for a number of years and not necessarily getting anywhere.
The chief executive at this rape crisis centre in London says the sector is struggling to meet increasing demand, while 3 centres have shut in the last year because of a lack of funding.
Dire, crisis point, broken. Quite frankly, people are dying.
The government told us they inherited a £22 billion black hole, but say they remain resolute in their mission to halve violence against women and girls. Their upcoming strategy will set out how they'll protect the most vulnerable. There appear to be challenges and concerns everywhere, a system and a sector under pressure, with a warning that victims of crime are paying the price. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Well, if you've been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans at any time, 116 123, or email joe@samaritans.org. Or if you suspect you're being abused and need to speak to someone, there are people who can help. The National Domestic Violence Helpline is on 0808 2000 247. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, where we're going to be talking to a change in the way that you book GP appointments in England. Will the 8 a.m. scramble be over? We'll discuss.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
From today, GP practices in England must offer online bookings for doctor's appointments throughout the day. It's hoped this will put an end to the daily 8 a.m. rush on the phone.
You need to just say why it is you want to come and see your GP, and your request in the online then gets triaged within the GP surgery, and you are sent to the right part of the GP surgery. It might be that you are better off seeing a pharmacist or a social prescriber than a GP, so you get directed then. But the big convenience piece is that all of that happens online at any point between 8 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. And that means you don't have to be rushing to get on the telephone at 8 a.m. and joining a queue, which can sometimes be many minutes or even hours long.
Well, let's get reaction to this now with GP Dr. Steve Taylor. So what's the time now? It's what, 9:20, Doctor? What's it been like this morning for you at your practice?
Yeah, so I've just had a quick look. We've got 20 waiting to be triaged, and there's about 60 left over from yesterday that need to be allocated in terms of the next few days.
And has that risen sharply compared to a normal day before this new online system came into place?
Well, I think we've got to work out why we've got an 8 a.m. rush in the first place. The reality is 1.4 million people will get an appointment within GP practices today. If you compare that with 67,000 turning up at A&E, there's a lot of people that do already navigate the system in order to get an appointment at a GP practice. The problem is we've got a capacity problem. If you think about why we've got an 8 a.m. rush, the reason is there's a lot of people who are trying to get appointments, and they're trying to get them because they need one. But 1.4 million get through, 1.4 million get appointments. The problem is there just isn't enough capacity. So we've got a capacity problem, and within that, we've also got a funding problem. We've got unemployed GPs, GPs that need work, and patients that need to see GPs. This is a sort of straw issue, I think, when it comes to why are the BMA whinging about this, why GPs complaining about it. I think it's really that there was nothing put in place to make it safe, that if a message came through at 6:15 this evening, one of the GPs has to action that. And in a small practice like the one I'm in, that means that people are going to have to stay later, stay around to make sure that that's done. It hasn't quite been thought through. I mean, on the face of it, having online access seems a brilliant idea for patients. I mean, I use the GP. I'm a GP as well, a patient as well. I've been number 30 in the queue, and I've also waited for a triage appointment to come back to me. So we're like everyone else. We want it to work for patients. It really has to work for patients.
Doctor, what do you think, or what would you have liked to have seen instead?
Well, I'm quite happy with online access. I think what the problem is we need to fix the issues around safety and capacity. I think, I've been a GP 30 years. We've always had a problem with people trying to access GPs. 30 years ago, it would have been a queue outside the front door. It then became a telephone queue. It's now an 8 a.m. rush, as West Streeting has called it. The reality is there is always been a problem with getting access to GPs, and we've got fewer GPs now per head of population. As a GP, I look after 2,300 patients now, compared with 1,800 just 10 years ago. There just aren't enough GPs in employment, and funding hasn't matched it, hasn't matched the increase in population.
Do you feel sort of some sympathy maybe for the Health Secretary when he says that we've invested X billion extra into the NHS, we've given some pay rises to some members of the NHS, and we can't do everything for everyone all at once, given, of course, there are lots of other sectors and ministers fighting for budget, and we know the pressures on the Chancellor. Do you have sympathy for the Health Secretary there or not?
Yeah, I do. I do have a bit of sympathy. I think the problem here is that this is, you'll hear in different newscasts over the last few weeks that there are 2,000 more GPs that have been employed in the last 12 months. That's not actually true. It's 1,000. It's 1,000 full-time equivalents. He said that there's £1 billion extra that have gone into general practice, but then you take away national insurance contributions, increasing inflation and other things, that works out about 300 million, which sounds a lot, but actually in a practice like mine, that's about £50,000, which again might sound a lot, but actually doesn't employ a GP. It only gives me a little bit more, room to manoeuvre in terms of running a practice. The reality is, this particular issue around keeping the phone lines open and the online access open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 at night has been put in without any of the safeguards in place. I think that's the problem, and it's been a top-down approach, and he hasn't really listened to. This isn't costing any more money. He hasn't really listened to doctors on the ground. He was saying this might not be safe for some patients, and it certainly isn't great for GPs.
Yeah, and I wonder where it puts the pressure, because obviously West Streeting has said that scramble at 8 a.m. in the morning puts pressure on doctors, receptionists, patients. But does it just put it somewhere else in the day, particularly with the drive to digital and those that are happy to make appointments online? Not everyone is.
No, 100%, and it does exclude the digitally excluded. I mean, I think that's a problem here. People still can ring up; they can still turn up at the door, and they'll be treated in exactly the same way as somebody that was, logging in online. But it's the constant run through the day. I mean, we had it open 24/7 after the pandemic, and what we found was that we had lots and lots of different requests, and people were treating it a little bit like they use Google, and we were getting questions after questions after questions, and sifting from the urgent and the important from the trivial and the unnecessary was quite hard. It's so much easier just with an online form just to fill it in and send a few requests across. It's actually talking it through with a receptionist live on the phone or at the desk can be much better. I mean, the system of triage is good. It will mean that, as Stephen Kennett pointed out, that you might be pointed towards a physio or a pharmacist. But the reality is a lot of people haven't asked for that when they got through. They're asking to see a doctor, a GP, and they're not going to be happy for that reason. So it's raising expectations for patients. They're going to think, oh, good, I can get an appointment, I can book it online, I can book a haircut, Wes said the other day. But the reality is there aren't any more GPs, there aren't any more appointments. And in fact, we're having to cut back some of our face-to-face appointments just to handle the extra pressure that we're going to get from all these extra online requests. So we've actually just temporarily cancelled all pre-bookable appointments for this next few weeks, just to see how the land lies in terms of all the extra requests that we might get, and then we'll see how it sits in 2 to 3 weeks' time.
Dr. Taylor, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
We'll let you get back to your very busy day ahead. Still to come on The Breakfast Show. After a short break, we'll be speaking to music legend Billy Bragg about the campaign to throw Israel out of the Eurovision Song Contest. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, we'll talk about the campaign to throw Israel out of the Eurovision Song Contest. We'll be joined by the musician Billy Bragg and the journalist at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan. But first, let's get you up to speed on all of the day's top stories.
The Prime Minister says Nigel Farage's immigration plan to abolish indefinite leave to remain is a racist policy. In an interview with Sky's political editor Beth Rigby, Sir Keir Starmer refused to call Mr Farage himself a racist. But Reform Zia Yusuf accused Labour of using inflammatory language because they can't beat them at the ballot box. Princess Anne has made a surprise visit to Ukraine, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. The pair discussed the UK's ongoing support for the country while paying tribute to the children killed in the conflict. The US government has shut down for the first time in 7 years. Thousands of government employees will be forced to stay home or work without pay after a deal couldn't be reached to extend federal funding. And there's been more heavy shelling in Gaza overnight as Hamas leaders decide on Donald Trump's proposed peace plan with Israel. He's given the terror group 4 days to make a decision.
Nigel Farage has hit back at Sir Keir Starmer, accusing him of being unfit to be Prime Minister. It comes as Keir Starmer said Reform's leader was not racist, but the party's immigration policy was. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister told our political editor Beth Rigby late yesterday.
Prime Minister, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
No, nor do I think Reform voters are racist. They're concerned about things like our borders, they're frustrated about the pace of change. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that they are racist. I was talking about a particular policy and making a distinction, and a really important distinction in my mind, between deporting those who have no right to be here, illegally here, which this government is doing and I agree with, and on the other hand, reaching into migrants lawfully here who've been here for years, working in our hospitals, our schools, and deporting them.
Yes.
That, to me, would tear our country apart.
But why is it a racist policy to deport people who are legally living here if they don't meet high income and English language requirements? Many people would think that policy is reasonable, not racist. So why have you described it as racist?
Because these are people who are lawfully here, who've contributed to our society. They're working in our NHS, working in our schools. They're our neighbours. They have contributed and built their lives in this country.
But some might go.
But this goes to the heart of who we are as a country. I want to serve the whole of this country, this beautiful, tolerant, diverse country. The alternative, this toxic division, would tear apart who we are as a country, and that's why it's a really fundamental issue.
Well, Beth joins me now, live from Liverpool. A very good morning to you, Beth. Great to see you. What ultimately did you make of the PM, both in speech and interview form yesterday? Will he be pleased with himself this morning?
Well, Wolf, I saw the PM. We did that interview shortly after the speech, so we went back into the hall. And I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister was a leader who felt it was a speech he needed to make. And the view amongst all of his team was that he landed it in that hall, and it has been very well received. It's probably one of the most cut-through speeches I can remember him doing, certainly since becoming Prime Minister. And why was that? I think there has been much criticism about Keir Starmer, about failing to find vision, to lead the party well, his managerial style and side. And I think what he did in that hall was he showed some passion and purpose in finding this common enemy, if you like, for Labour supporters and members and grassroots members to rally around, which is Nigel Farage. And he drew these dividing lines, didn't he, in that speech between what he called was the populism of Farage and the division and decline that he will drive into the country. That was the Prime Minister's argument. And then his vision of Britain built on renewal and the Labour project of rebuilding the country. And it was a speech light, really, on policy, but very heavy on politics. And it seems to have really galvanised the party, because now they have something to fight against, which is Nigel Farage and reform. So in that, he was very successful. I think the bigger question for him is the challenges ahead with the budget, very difficult local elections. And of course, 15 months in, despite all the talk of changing the country, people are not feeling better off. They're not feeling their public services are improving. So he's got a hell of a way to go to try and close the polls. But this, if you like, was a man putting down a marker, talking about a fork in the road, telling the country what path they should take and telling people to pick him.
Beth, I don't know if you then saw my conversation with Zia Yusuf last hour, but clearly, either way, we've seen how vociferously and passionately Reform have pushed back. In my conversation with Zia Yusuf, he said that the Prime Minister's language was inciting violence against Nigel Farage. He even implied he was doing so intentionally, wouldn't rule out that interpretation of his words. He even implied that the Prime Minister was a terrorist based on some of his language. So clearly, this is as heated a debate on as important an accusation and as a topic as I can remember for years in British politics. And I just sort of wonder where we go from here, because there's sort of a snapshot on this where both of these two sides, Reform and Labour, potentially quite like what's happened in this week. They quite like the coverage they're getting, but let's hope not solely on this topic going forward.
Look, it's a really good question. It's a good point, Wilf, but I think that in a way, this is what the Labour Party, this is what the Prime Minister actually wants. They want the dividing line. They want to paint this government, the Labour movement, the Labour Party, as the people that are having one vision of Britain as opposed to a Nigel Farage's vision of Britain, which he is trying to characterise as one that is divisive and it's all about decline of the country. And that is the battle lines the Prime Minister wants. So actually, Zia Yusuf coming in and attacking him on that and amplifying the fight that the Prime Minister wants to have is not necessarily a bad thing for Labour or the PM. I think what he was doing in that interview yesterday and what you will hear around the Labour Party and where it could get trickier as well is he was trying to draw a very fine line, or make a clear line, if you like, between what he described as racist policy and Nigel Farage being a racist, or indeed people that supported Reform supporting racist policies. So he's trying to actually pin the criticisms on Nigel Farage, the man, not on his supporters, because that would, in a way, perhaps insult voters that are looking at Reform because they're dissatisfied with the government. But the thing that struck me, actually, in the Prime Minister's speech was when he talked about a battle for the soul of the nation. And, Wilf, you will know this because I think, you follow US politics very carefully too. But, that was a speech that Joe Biden made in 2022 ahead of the US midterm elections, when he said that the fight between the Democrats and the populist right, in this case Donald Trump's Republicans, was a battle for the soul of the nation and one that he wanted to win. And actually, Starmer is adopting those sorts of tactics, that sort of language, and trying to pitch himself against what he sees as the populist right here, which is Nigel Farage. So I think that debate is going to play out, and he's played his hand now, and he's gone in for these personal attacks, and he's gone in and found passion, actually, and purpose, as I said, in taking Nigel Farage on. And I think this is now the dividing line of our politics, and it comes at a time when Labour are a good 10 points behind in the polls against Reform. So this is, I think, the beginning, if you like, of a campaign certainly going into the local elections. And I think you're going to see a much more of this, much noisier politics and much more attacking politics from both sides.
It's going to be fascinating, Beth. And my other question is the extent to which, as soon as Monday morning, perhaps, but certainly as we approach November, when in fact the focus comes back to things like the budget and the economy and the actual performance, the numbers, which of course, when you're in government, you get held to account for, as opposed to just the rhetoric. But fascinating coverage throughout, and a brilliant interview. And I think you asked all of the right questions to get to the heart of exactly what Keir Starmer meant by using the word racist. Well worth watching if you haven't already. The full one, of course, online. Beth, for now, thanks so much. We'll see more of Beth and the team throughout the morning from conference. Now, the organisers of Eurovision have announced plans to hold an emergency vote on whether Israel should be included in next year's song contest after several countries threatened to boycott the competition. Broadcasters from a host of countries, including Iceland, Spain and Ireland, say Israel should not be allowed to participate until the war in Gaza ends. I'm joined now by the singer and songwriter Billy Bragg and the journalist at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan, both of whom are here with Leah and I. Very good morning to you both. Thanks so much for joining us. Billy, quick snapshot on this overall. Is this normal bit of politics that we sometimes see at Eurovision, or is this something very different?
Oh, it's different because it involves Israel, but I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary in seeking to ban a country because of their actions. Russia was banned a few years ago after the invasion of Ukraine. And I think if we have one rule for the Ukrainians and another rule for the Palestinians, it starts to look like we only care about white-skinned people and not brown-skinned people.
Yeah, and to Billy's point there, Josh, often these campaigns, they live and die, don't they, on public perception. What do you think is the snapshot or the temperature of how people feel around this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just really quickly, I want to correct something that Billy said, that the Russian broadcaster was not banned because of the Russian government's actions in Ukraine. They were banned because fundamentally this is a competition between different broadcast associations and the Russian broadcaster broke rules. There's not been any indication that the Israeli broadcaster has broken rules or engaged in propaganda, so just firstly for that. Secondly, I think the temperature around this is after 2 years of war, incredibly overheated, and I think incredibly, you know, in proportion to the amount of people that actually care about this day to day, I think it's become way out of proportion. And there's a minority of people who want to see Israel completely removed from every example of public life in the country around the world. And, you know, if you look at the results of the public vote, where Ireland and Spain both gave Israel 12 points, I think it's a minority of people. And, you know, while the debate is overheated in this space, I don't think it's reflective of the reality.
But Billy, do you think it's gone more sort of poisonous with its tone on this particular topic versus some of the other examples of politicisation of the Eurovision Song Contest?
I think it's gone poisonous because of the images we're seeing from Gaza. I think the whole situation has changed. In the last few months, people look at it now as more as a humanitarian crisis, the images of the IDF shooting people, killing people who are seeking aid. I think everybody's right to feel outraged about that. And what can we do here in the West? You know, in the 1980s, it was South Africa that we were fighting against over apartheid. And we undertook a boycott. You know, you look to see where your fruit was coming from. If it's coming from South Africa, you can still do that with Israel. We could ban them from taking part in sporting events, from cultural events. And I think that kind of pressure is the sort of thing that individuals can do, even if our government won't step up. I'd like to see the Labour Party, the Labour government, step up and stop selling arms to Israel. You know, we're in many ways, we're felicitating what the IDF are doing in Gaza, and I think we should, all of us, be out in the streets complaining about that.
So, Josh, is Eurovision the place to make those protests?
Look, I would say that if someone could explain to me how banning Israel from Eurovision saves one Palestinian life or ends the conflict in Gaza, I think, you know, hopefully all of this will be irrelevant because there's a peace deal on the table, and if that gets accepted, then the war will be over, which many Israelis, Jews all over the world, and many people want. I don't think Eurovision is necessarily the place for it, in the same way that I don't think cultural boycotts more generally are the solution to this diplomatic and political crisis. You know, I think when you do cultural boycotts and when you marginalise people from the creative community, what you're saying is, these people who are often the more reasonable aspects of Israeli society shouldn't be listened to, shouldn't be heard from, shouldn't be whatever. And so what that says to Israelis is that, look, you don't want to hear from us at all. These are our more reasonable people. Then, you know, we don't care what you want to say either.
What's your response to that, Billy?
Well, that was the same with South Africa. You know, obviously those black artists wanted their voice to get out, but the cultural boycott of South Africa, I think, did have an effect. If you look at what happened with Paul Simon and Gracelands, there was a lot of pressure on them, massive demonstrations here in London against South Africa outside their embassy. And I think we're coming to the stage where you do see that. And I'm afraid, I feel sorry for those people in Israel who are, like us, protesting against this war. And I also hope very much, Josh, that the peace deal does work and we do have peace. But in some ways, by protesting against Israel being in the Eurovision Song Contest, we're standing with those people in Israel who are trying to stop the war, who are on the streets every day protesting the Netanyahu's government continued policy to destroy Gaza.
What's your sort of view, Billy, though, towards those actual individuals that I guess Josh kind of referenced, the performers who might have been training for a long... You often think about that around Olympics. You know, people spend their whole life and career. It's not quite the same scale when it comes to Eurovision, not suggesting that the same level of preparation doesn't go in. But what is your message to those? They might well be the people who are sharing the same point of view as you.
60,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza, 20,000 of them children. I'm more concerned about those than the careers of some singer-songwriters.
But do you, I mean, I guess, do you think that will change the outcome of a peace deal?
It sends a message. Fundamentally, it sends a message. You know, Israel is a country that portrays itself as a Western democracy, and it's very proud of that. You know, that's why they're in Eurovision, because they're a pluralistic democracy. And in that situation, they have to be held to a higher standard than you might hold another country that's not a democracy or is a failed state. And because they're in Eurovision, we have the opportunity to send a message, not just to the people who watch Eurovision, but to the people of Israel, that we too would like to see an end to this terrible, terrible conflict.
Josh, interesting, of course, timing to be having this discussion, given that a peace deal is on the table. It seems hastily engineered by the Trump administration. I think that's perhaps fair to say, but thus far seemingly accepted by Israel, albeit not sold domestically yet. Waiting for the response from Hamas. Are you optimistic on that? Are people optimistic, or is it going to be just like all the many other deals we've seen before them?
Well, I mean, look, I think the fact that there's even this deal that's been supported by the majority of the Arab world, has been supported by countries like Turkey and Pakistan and other players, like we have never seen that before so far in this war. I think what I would just say on a sort of personal level as a British Jew and as someone that has family in Israel and cares a lot about it, I think we all want to see an end to this war. And I think we all hope that, you know, hopefully this is the plan that will engineer a situation that's acceptable to everybody.
Josh and Billy, thank you both for joining us. Good to see you both. So to come here on The Breakfast Show. We are not playing that because it was a Billy request to go to break. We're playing it because we sat down with Boyzone yesterday. And we'll have it after this.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
The US government has shut down for the first time in almost 7 years after last-ditch attempts to agree a spending bill failed. Our correspondent Martha Kellner has more for us.
This is a huge deal. As of midnight Washington DC time, the US government is in shutdown for the first time in more than 6 years. And that's because this Senate is deadlocked on two competing funding bills, one proposed by the Republicans and one proposed by Democrats. But this is not just about politicians. This will have a very big impact. This shutdown will have a real world impact on ordinary people. National parks, for example, the likes of the Grand Canyon and Yosemite, they will go unstaffed. Some may be forced to close down while this shutdown continues. Things like, the National Mall, that iconic stretch of land between the Capitol building where these very politicians work and the Lincoln Memorial, that will be chained up. Donald Trump has said that there will be mass layoffs of federal workers. He says that will include Democrats. President Trump, as you may imagine, is trying to spin this to his political advantage. He says that Democrats are holding out because they're trying to pursue free healthcare, in his words, for illegal aliens. That is a false claim. While Democrats are pursuing more affordable healthcare for Americans, that would not extend to undocumented immigrants. On the other hand, Republicans are saying that Democrats are being hypocrites. They're saying that Democrats want a public showdown with this president, never mind the cost to ordinary Americans. And I guess the really crucial thing is we just don't know how long this standoff between the two political parties, how long this shutdown will last.
Martha Kellner there for us. And should just mention S&P 500 futures are down 0.6% this morning. This, of course, developed at about midnight US time, so we haven't had a full open session yet. But pointing to a lower open, Leah, but nothing too pronounced. And just a reminder to state the obvious, obviously, a government shutdown in the US. It's not the same as a default. We've had them before. They're rare, they're bad, but they're not perhaps as significant as the title of them sounds if they don't prolong too long. There was two during Trump's first term, one of which was very long, 35 days. There was one in the Obama term, which was fairly long as well, I think 16 days. The longer it goes on, the more it's a problem, because if people aren't being paid, if federal employees aren't being paid, and they start to, if they're living paycheck to paycheck, start to run out of money, then obviously it affects them personally in the economy much more. But in the short term, if it only lasts a week or so, it won't really have much lasting effect. We shall see.
OK, we shall see. We're going to bring viewers back to the UK now, right here in the studio, because yesterday we were talking about Boyzone. There's a reunion tour. Well, not a tour, it's one-off days, isn't it? I wish it was a tour. At the Emirates, the greatest stadium in the country. And now Beth Newman was off to interview Boyzone about that upcoming reunion date. Here's a little bit of that interview.
Wilfred Frost, our breakfast presenter, turns out to be a massive Boyzone fan, and in particular, sorry lads, he's into Ronan. He loves your music. Ronan, he asked me to ask you, will you be playing any of your solo hits at the show?
At Boyzone, but no, we haven't. No.
We always do the Notting Hill one.
Oh yeah, we could do that.
We have to do roller coasters as
Oh,
well.
okay, we do that as well.
Actually,
Yes.
dance-
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Should
We're
we
doing.
dance at each day as if it's our last?
Yes, we're doing. So yes, the answer is we're doing all of my second album.
Ronan is supporting us on the
Yes,
night.
I'm going to come out before the band and I'm going to do a few songs and then I'll do. No. But yes, might do a few songs. Thank you, Wilfred.
It's my pleasure, Ronan. It's my pleasure. And thank you, Bethany, as well, because that was great.
This is remarkable. I think we've been doing this together for about 7 months and I didn't know that you were a Boyzone fan. Look,
Love boy bands.
This is
Boyzone in
incredible.
particular.
And our editor is telling us that I can say this to you, that his 8-year-old has more musical tastes than you do.
I accept that charge, but I think his 8-year-old has more musical choice than he does as well. But no, listen, I accept it's far from trendy to love a bit of boy band music, particularly once you're 40, but I'm afraid I still do. And I very much enjoyed yesterday putting it back on again after I was reminded of all of the great hits. And I think we'll have the real answer, I say this to our producer, about how popular it is when we see how quickly it sells out.
I think it will sell out pretty quick. They've got a really hardcore set of fans, Boyzone, and it is also in memory of Stephen Gately, who passed away. But should we have a little bit of a listen to a couple of tracks from Boyzone? Father and Son, do we have that, DJ?
To make a change, just relax, take it easy. You're still young, that's your fault. There's so much you have to know. Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry.
That does it for us on Breakfast today. We'll leave it with your music. Sky News Today on the other side of this.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?